Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This March 16th, 2021 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councilors Burdick.
Here.
Ruff.
Here.
Mboop.
Yes.
Mans.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
And Winland.
Here.
Thank you. And now Councilor Winland is going to lead us in pledge.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Winland. Before we get going, this is Arbor Month, and since 1989, Lake Oswego has been recognized as a Tree City USA for its effective urban and community forestry program. Arbor Day was founded in Nebraska in 1872 as settlers longed for the trees they left behind in their towns further east. And on the first Arbor Day, it is estimated that 1 million trees were planted. And I think we can surpass that goal in Councilor Winland's backyard alone. So both the practical role trees play as a renewable resource, a combatant of climate change, and a provider of habitat amongst many other benefits, and plus the emotional connection that we share to trees, many that far outlive all of us, the stewards who look over them, endear us to these steadfast soldiers of the land. We live in homes made of trees in a community defined by a lush canopy enjoyed and relied upon by all living creatures. Especially during this past year, our connection to the outdoors, the benefits brought to all of us have furthered our collective appreciation of the nature around us. For these reasons and more, I hereby proclaim April 2021 as Arbor Month and urge all residents to celebrate Arbor Month and support efforts to protect trees and woodlands and to plant and care for trees for the benefit of this and future generations. Okay. And next on the agenda is public comment. Ms. Linder, who do we have first for public comment?
Yes, we have Mr. Chisholm with us. And Mr. Chisholm, if you're ready to unmute.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Craig Chisholm. I have a home in Lake Oswego. Can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. Thank you.
Some years ago, I was looking at the possibility of putting solar arrays on my home. I had trees along the south side, and that presented a problem. I got to thinking about the issue of solar production, the production of a reduction of CO2 because of solar panels versus the sequestration of CO2 because of the trees blocking it. It's a rather complicated problem to figure that out, but I turned to a rather brilliant friend, a rather brilliant family with a lot of knowledge about solar. And we worked together. He knew about the solar and the calculations and the assumptions and all that sort of thing. I knew something about trees. We came up with a minor research paper, rather amateurish thing, but I think pretty solid, and presented it to the city. The conclusion of that that study was that the solar arrays were in the net sense, and only looking at CO2 production, were 10 to 20 times more effective in diminishing solar production than the trees. Now, I don't think anybody ever did anything with that research, but I did run into recently another piece of research we knew nothing about at the time we did ours, that came up with a figure of 10 times more effective at diminishing CO2 than the shading trees. Now, I call that to your attention because one, we have a different result than I presented before, but significantly, someone else is coming up with much the same result, although lesser. I think we're right, but leave it at that. But that does pose a problem to the city that it has to balance, if true, and the city should do its own research. If that is true, then the city needs to study a way of harmonizing the particular interests of trees and their CO2 sequestration and the situations where trees prevent the production of solar by solar arrays because of shading them. Now, I've run out of time and you're probably out of patience to hear me. I do have an idea on how to harmonize them, but I have run out of time.
Well, Mr. Chisholm, thank you for that. And if you have other information, please email to us. It's very interesting.
Well, I already did. I already gave our report to the city some years ago.
Well, email it again because we're a new group.
Will you read it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who should I not mail it to?
Oh, well, okay. Yes, that would be great. We appreciate you being here.
I'll give you the source of the second internet, the article I found on the internet.
Okay.
And who should I send that to, planning or what?
Are you going to paper mail it?
Yeah, just email it. Just
Oh,
email the contact, and then they can read it themselves and look at it.
We will. We have Miss Linder has your contact information. She'll send you a good place to send it.
All right, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Ms. Linder, who's next?
All right, next we have Mr. Stendhal. If you are ready, you can go ahead and unmute and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, my name is Ron Stenda. How are you guys doing today? I hope you're well. I want to talk a little bit about a citation I received for cutting down some trees. That was done not on purpose. I did not do it intentionally, willfully, or intentionally. And I was fined $3,200 for doing such. Prior to me cutting those trees down, I contacted the city, and it was on a Friday, and they said that if I could do the cutting and then get the permit thereafter, because they were leaning over and some of them were decayed and some of them were rotted. There was also one that had been previously, looked like they had cut it in 2 spots, but they didn't finish the cut. And so one of those I went ahead and cut down as well. We are in the process of wanting to down some additional trees so we can build some property there. It's at 18901 Hilltop Road in Lake Oswego. And that property has been very neglected and abused, and there has been some fighting with ownership over the last 5 years of that. And finally, the owner got possession of it through a court order. And so he lives in Utah. I live in Oregon, and I've been kind of helping him out. If we had known that this was required to do so, then we would have abided by all the regulations that was required. But unbeknownst to us, I was not aware of that until someone had mentioned that there was supposed to be some permits obtained. We plan on making the property that is, I would between a 1 and 10. I would say this property is a 2, and we want to make the property a 10. And we want to make the 3 lots. Right now, I believe it's 3, and we want to section those off and build a couple of nice houses on there, and probably spend over probably close to $1 million on this property. And I'm just asking at this point that these fees be reconsidered in a possible way. We don't mind buying the permits after the fact, which was what we was going to do, but it was such a chaos during that period of time that and the owner had to come down from Utah, but it was such a chaos that everything, it seemed like everybody was fighting with one another, and we didn't like that. I didn't like when I'm using a chainsaw or equipment, someone's coming up behind me who I don't even know because of safety regulations, without wearing masks, without wearing helmets, in case something had fallen on them. I'm just asking that we be allowed to go into a positive scenario here and make this, I know that Lake Oswego is a very beautiful city and I enjoy it. And we want to make the property that we have more appealing to everybody that is our neighbors in the surrounding areas up at Hilltop. And so that's all I have for now, unless you guys have any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sindel. We appreciate you coming. If there is, we may have more power than you think we do, but if there's an opportunity for you to file some kind of an appeal through the process our city has, then we will, I'm sure the staff will notify you of what that appeal process is. Thank you for again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Lick-
Next, Mayor, we have Ms. Wasco.
Thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Betsy Wasco. I live at 320 Durham, and I'm here to respectfully ask that you consider banning leaf blowers or at least have their use significantly limited. Leaf blowers, and especially gas blowers, are an acoustic assault. The high decibels penetrate walls and windows and can be heard from many blocks away. In my opinion, they're overused. 3 weeks ago, I tracked this devil's symphony in my neighborhood and noticed 6 consecutive days where a blower's whine could be heard for at least 2 hours, and there were hardly any leaves on the ground. Blowers interrupt concentration, impair recovery from illnesses, interfere with people's ability to work from home, cause a loss of vegetation, insects, and biodiversity, contaminate the air, soil, and water, cause hearing injury, including hearing loss, tinnitus, and hyperacusis. They cause lung disease, cancer, especially lung and bladder cancer, and cause heart disease and hypertension. The Oregon legislature, presently in House Bill 3023, is considering a ban on the sale of or use of gas blowers in the Tri-County area. Gas blowers are so dangerous that Oakland, California, recently banned them publicly and privately effective April 2021. That's almost an immediate ban. Many other cities and towns have also already banned them. It's well known that gas blowers emit huge amounts of carbon dioxide. California air quality officials found that in 2020, gas-powered lawn equipment will create more ozone pollution than all passenger cars combined in that state. I've heard the argument, we don't want to harm landscape businesses, many of which are minority owned. This argument confuses me for 2 reasons. First, a ban or significant curtailment of the use of blowers would be better for businesses, landscape businesses, simply because with brooms or rakes or manually, it would take them a little bit more time to clear leaves. More time is more money for them. Secondly, allowing blowers is contrary to diversity, equity, and inclusivity goals. Many operators are minorities and low wage earners. So if one looks at the spectrum of DEI, on one end we have true equality, egalitarianism, expansive civil rights. On the other end, we have restricted fundamental rights, slavery, exploitation, oppression. Standing by and allowing low-paid, often minority workers to immerse themselves in a toxic stew of carcinogenic vapors and particulates for 10 to 20 hours per week and ruining their hearing and cardiovascular systems is not loving. It is closer on the DEI spectrum to slavery and indifference and exploitation and oppression than it is to the embrace of fundamental rights and love of our fellow brothers and sisters. In conclusion, as part of our city's climate action plan and DEI goals, please consider banning or curtailing leaf blowers and especially gas blowers. It's better for business, better for the environment, and it's consistent with the goals of DEI. Thank you for your time. And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Wasco. We appreciate your comments. Okay.
And Mayor, we have Mr. Ormsby joining the meeting now.
Mr. Ormsby, welcome. Mr. Ormsby, are you, you're on mute.
Got it now?
Okay, yes, we can hear you.
All right.
We have communication problems. This is Charles Ormsby. I'm calling from Arizona. I'm monitoring things in Lake Oswego. I sent you about listed 10 items. I'll go through them fast. Discrimination of neighborhoods, discrimination of caregivers and unemployed. When is the next neighborhood chairs meeting? I'd like to know that. I'd also like to get a list of contacts for the various standing committees and boards. I was cut out, in my opinion, of the Sustainability Advisory Board meeting yesterday because of lack of understanding of protocols. I've been cut out of the North Anchor project. I was the last one to testify when there was open meetings about a year ago before the pandemic shut everything down. I've not been communicated with since then with respect to the North Anchor project, WO172. I want transit access there. I'm looking at your drawings. Thank you, Carrie Linder, for sending them to me. I don't see anybody in wheelchairs with respect to that as one example. I don't see, in fact, on one of them, I think it's the second slide and that you're in your presentation for agenda item 8.1. Fire hydrant's been taken out. I don't know what you're going to do with it. How you're going to, I'm just saying what I'm seeing. But again, that is a short radius turn. It's been a pain in the arse for both transit riders making connections at the Lake Oswego Transit Center and TriMet drivers trying to get to that since TriMet was conceived in 1970. I have a schedule in 1978, so on and so forth. I've given testimony on this before. I'm frankly getting ready to file complaints because that's the only way we seem unemployed, unsuccessful, unproperty people seem to be able to deal with the council on transit-related matters. Also, I've got extreme concerns. I will not personally live below the 80-foot elevation with respect to the Willamette River. You're planning to put in 2,000 people in the foothills per your 2012 foothills plan and using that to leverage today's Tryon Creek wastewater treatment plant project. These things are not being disclosed. First one is Oswego Creek Dam. You need, as council people, to get that dam inspection report 2017, if not 2020, because the Oregon Department of Water Resources rated that dam suspect. You need to see it before you start spending $200+ million down there and whatnot. A whole bunch of terminology has to be understood by everybody, literally from Ross Island Bridge south and upstream to the Willamette Falls. You got problems, and they're not, the ancient, about 200-year-old adage, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Everybody has been pulling the wool out over my eyes for about 10, 15 years on foothills and the safety of doing that. I do want a USGS hazard evaluation from, again, as I said, Ross Island South and upstream to the Willamette Falls. A whole bunch of nomenclature has to be understood. I've had tremendous problems dealing with understanding that, and God help you. I've got about 4 map nomenclatures to understand, plus codes of the finest resolution, so I can find out what a water hydro project is on the Clackamas River. I'm scared, and I'm advising people not to live below the 80-foot elevation. It is that concerning, and you're getting ready to put 2,000 people down there. So what are we going to do about it? And also, when is the next chairs meeting? If there's ever going to be, and why does the council give priority communication to the Chamber of Commerce and just about everybody else and exclude the neighborhoods, as has been done for, frankly, about a year or better?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ormsby.
Okay, good day. Smiles all day. Good day.
Take care. Ms. Linder, is there anyone else for public comment?
No, Mayor, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone who gave comment, and thank you, everyone who emails us. We always appreciate feedback, suggestions, and comments. Our next item on the agenda is a study session on the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. Ms. Slepian is here along with the members of our Sustainability Advisory Board, and we welcome you all to the meeting. It's great to have you all here.
Hello, Mayor and councilors. I'm very excited to be at my first meeting with all of you with this new batch. It's a lot of fun. I'm gonna not be the centerpiece of today's study session, so I will just quickly introduce myself and staff report, and then I will turn it over to the experts on our Sustainability Advisory Board. Stephanie Glazer and Kathleen Weens are our co-chairs, and they will sort of be guiding the discussion with some of our other members here today who will be providing their own expert input. So I think it'll be a really great meeting and a great chance for you all to meet. As you know, I submitted a staff report, which is slightly different from the memo that SAB provided to you as well. There are just a couple of things that I thought were great to come from their perspective, whereas the purpose of my staff report was to give you more of a status update on where we are with a lot of the items that we had pulled out of the plan at the end of last year to really focus on for 2021. And the great thing is that, as you could see in the report, a lot of those items have already been completed or are already in progress just through our normal city operations and the daily grind of the sustainability program. So we are making some good progress already on some of the actions that were in the plan. And then I pulled out for your further consideration some items that I consider to be higher priority that I am hoping we can get some feedback and direction on from the city council today. And then there were some items in there that we haven't started yet, but I indicated them as lower priority because they're, you know, things like, you know, an employee carpooling forum. I think those are items that we can sort of manage just, you know, within staff. So we probably don't need to spend some of our time today talking about those. But those items that I did pull out, and I'm happy to go through them again if you would like to. But again, I would like to try to get SAB talking as quickly as possible. They get to hear my voice probably more than they need to. But those items that are higher priority, along with the items that SAB would like to talk to you about today, I think I would definitely appreciate some direction from the council on some of those, or even some prioritization. So that is what I am hoping to achieve. But I would like to now turn it over to Stephanie Glazer, who will give you an introduction to the work that SAB has been doing, and then she will bring in some of our other board members who will add in some of their expertise as well. Stephanie.
Great, thank you, Jenny, and thanks for the opportunity. We're so pleased to be here. So as Jenny mentioned, much of the work that we're excited about is underway. We did put together a memo just to really outline sort of 5 of the top areas that really rose to the top in our goal setting, as well as just in reflecting on the past year that we've seen, really with the wildfires in the summer, with the ice storms, certainly with the ongoing pandemic. That really helped bring to light some of the need around improving resiliency and our climate adaptation. So with that sort of brief intro, 5 of us will each speak 1 per topic to just lay out a brief idea of what we're interested to share and to dialogue with you about. And then we would plan for greater discussion if that works for you. In that case, I will hand over the microphone to Buzz to kick us off.
Hi there, I'm Buzz Chandler and a member of the committee, as Stephanie said. And so just to start things off here, the first section we put together in the memo was to improve resiliency and enhance climate adaptation for the city and the area. And we reflected on this because initially we were looking at, you know, long-term sustainability in more terms of like the environment and then those sorts of things. But given the last year and everything that's happened, we came to the realization, I don't think it was an epiphany of a single moment, but as events went along, of adapting to climate change is also thinking about resiliency. And resiliency as a community, how the community operates, how the city operates, those sorts of things. And so we've sort of maybe adjusted our, and if somebody has a different idea, let me know. Adjusting our mission to be a little bit more not only sustainable, but sustainable resiliency. for the city and some of these policies that we're looking at. And this has been based on wildfires, ice storm, all the things that happened there. We have a short list of short-term actions in the memo we sent. And instead of going over those one by one, and for the sake of moving on here with the meeting, because we've got a lot of ground to cover, I think we could refer to those to review at a later date in detail. And also we have some longer term actions that we have been discussing with subjects that have come up, such as burying power lines. Is it better to bury or leave them above ground? This came out of the ice storm. But the other thing was large scale batteries and EV use. And how do we prepare the area for, say, a major event, and you need first responder vehicles that may be EV. How do you keep them charged up? Maybe that's, solar panel arrays with battery backups, something in the future. Essentially, think of it, how do you harden yourself using the environment that we have? Because one thing to remember is nature always gets the last time at bat. So that's something to remember for long term, and that's really what we're looking at here. And part of it is, I think we got a lot of, all of us got a bit of a wake-up call with the little note about the water system being backed up using the partnership with Tigard. I think that caught a lot of people by surprise, that we need to look deeper and really build out the resiliency of the city long term, so that we can not only maybe help them in the future, but everybody can be better off, and build in those critical sort of redundancies for the critical infrastructure as we move forward. Because if you're prepared for it and working for it in a good, sustainable, environmental manner, that's probably going to mean that you're building yourself for a resilient, hardened infrastructure manner. And I think the bottom line that we're all going to be looking at is one of fiscal resiliency, because these kinds of events can cripple a community in many ways, especially fiscally. So with good long-term planning, maybe something to put in a project costs a little more upfront, but in the long term, it's much more redundant and saves a lot of money. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm going to hand it back to Stephanie right now.
Terrific. Thanks, Buzz. So to continue through that thread, the second topic in our memo was around a recommendation to assess and articulate the sustainability impacts of city policies and initiatives. And so really looking broadly at not just the fiscal impact, but also those environmental and social implications of decision making. And to the point of even highlighting it, I think of voter pamphlets when I'm reading about items on the ballot, and there's a clearly stated fiscal impact. And I would love to see alongside that fiscal impact also the sustainability and climate impact. What does this policy result in? And really calling that, articulating that explicitly. And I think there's a tie-in, as Buzz mentioned, between the financial costs and the environmental and social costs. Often environmental and social costs remain externalities. So we make decisions and there are implications felt, whether it's increased healthcare costs because of chronic exposure to something, or whether there's disaster cleanup costs because we didn't harden infrastructure and we had more repairs required, more cleanup effort needed. If we can really take a very broad view of what those impacts are, so that we're rolling those externalities, those financial costs into our fiscal assessments, and we're rolling in those environmental and social impacts into a clearly articulated sustainability and climate impact assessment. We identified as the short-term action would really be identifying where might this appear. I mentioned voter pamphlets, council reports, places where those decisions and discussions could be helpful to inform certainly city decision makers as well as the public. so that we're fully informed in making those assessments, whether to support or oppose something. The longer term actions would look at what are the evaluation criteria? How might those assessments take place? What type of information would be considered so that that can be applied methodically, consistently, comparatively. And I think there's a lot of guidance in that space from other fiscal organizations. SASB comes to my mind, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. There's just a lot of good work in that space. I also wanted to make a final note before I pass the baton that the positioning of the city around sustainability, resiliency, climate, mitigation and adaptation, it affects our credit rating. I included in the memo a couple of footnotes there from Moody's and from Bloomberg that indicate this is really becoming top of mind for investors. This is sustainability performance is becoming a part of that mainstream evaluation in making investments. And so therefore the cost of capital, cities' ability to borrow money will become dependent upon how well positioned we are with respect to these sustainability considerations. So thank you, and I will pass the baton to Matt to talk about EV. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Stephanie and Buzz. I think just sort of a continuation on what y'all are talking about and looking at EVs as an opportunity to address resiliency as well. I don't think that's often the way that we think of EVs, but certainly during this last ice storm, there's examples of EVs being used as generators to power homes, to charge cell phones, things of that nature. But I think what you'll see in the memo that we put together is there's kind of a couple of things that we're looking at approaches to EVs, and one is sort of how is the city supporting an electrification of the city fleet, and also how are we looking to prepare our city for sort of future-minded or forward-thinking individuals who are looking to replace their ICE vehicles with EVs. And so the steps that we've kind of articulated are in the short-term evaluation, looking at what's currently on the market, what is feasible. You know, when we're looking to buy new vehicles for our fleets, is there an evaluation process that we go through to ask the why and why not questions? You know, why would we buy an ICE vehicle? Why would we not buy an EV? So initially, it's a lot of evaluation and just trying to kind of, as a city, approach it from that perspective first. But then moving into certainly an execution by buying vehicles or putting in the infrastructure that we need to support our citizens as we see more and more electric vehicles on our roadways. I mean, I joke with my brother-in-law who lives in Alabama that Teslas are not that unique anymore in Lake Oswego. So he comes and visits and he's like, hey, you guys have a lot of Teslas here. Yeah, we do have a lot of Teslas here. We do have a lot of EV cars here. And I think there's about 1,500 on our city streets. And that's a very real number. And so when we talk about what is the infrastructure to support those 1,500 EVs, that's something that certainly some onus comes to the owner of the EV. But then there's also, I think, a little bit of ownership from the city and the council to provide that infrastructure that we have there. And you know, as we look at manufacturers, GM's going to be basically fully electric by 35, Land Rover, Jaguar by 30. I don't think they're going to be alone. We don't think they're going to be alone in those endeavors. So not only are people expecting it, but there's going to be more options. Right now, there's just not that many options when we look at fleet vehicles necessarily, but I think there's going to be more options for us to consider. And we talked a little bit about resiliency, and I think that's not to be forgotten, certainly. And there's a lot of reasons why EVs would be beneficial there. So very excited to talk more about that. Certainly, I think we have an opportunity to be a leader in the electrification space. But with that, I think I'm handing it over to Ben to talk a little bit about the certification program.
Yeah, thank you. So to tell you a little bit about why I'm presenting this, in addition to my role as a youth member of the Sustainability Advisory Board, I'm one of 4 community sustainability interns who are making the Residential Sustainability Certification Program. And I'm going to be telling you a little bit about it, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have at any time. The end goal of this is the creation of a certification program that encourages residents to take sustainability into their own hands and make their homes and themselves more environmentally friendly. In order to begin the program, the participant basically fills out a checklist listing various sustainability home improvements they've already made or are about to make in a couple of main categories. Those categories being things like reduce, reuse, recycle, energy conservation, and water conservation, transportation, and DEI. A couple of examples of these actions are things like installing low flow shower heads or low flow faucets. And these are basically designed to encourage residents to take those first few introductory steps. Once they are certified and meet that bar, they progress to the next level of our program, which basically takes 2 main paths. The first one is basically a continuation of what they've already done. Where they try to meet higher and higher requirements, doing more and more to their home to make it more sustainable. And that can look like having an EV or having a low flow toilet or other sustainable actions that can make their home have a better environmental impact. The other aspect of the program and the part that's a bit newer is the community engagement aspect. With all of the participants who engage in this program, we are going to essentially place them into pods, which is a group of 10 people who similarly engaged in the program and meet monthly or so to discuss group actions that they can all take to make their community as a whole more sustainable and sort of keep them accountable for the more habitual actions. It can be really hard to remember to turn the lights off, to turn off the faucet while you're brushing your teeth. All these small actions that doing a checklist really doesn't account for. So that's what we're hoping to address with this community aspect, where people have other people that they're accountable to and that they want to, impress and make sure they're doing a good job with. For those who aren't able to engage in pods for whatever reason, they'll have the opportunity to partner with advisors. And that's a big theme of this as well. We want this to be accessible to everyone. We have a big focus on DEI, and that's one of our sections. We require participants to complete at least 1 bullet point in each category to make sure that they can't just ignore some categories. Additionally, we're doing everything we can to accommodate people who are renting and accommodate people who are renovating or living in multifamily homes. And this means that people are going to be able to complete the program and reach all the stages of progression without being hit by some roadblock that requires them to hit their home, or without having an undue burden because they can't, buy solar panels or meet some exorbitant cost. In order to facilitate this, we've been working with the city's IT people, and we hope to have a website up and running soon. Our pilot program is going to go live April 22nd, where we'll have our first pod of people, around 10 participants that we're going to gather from a mix of people who aren't as active in the sustainability world and people who are more experienced, like people who are active in LOSN or have demonstrated that they understand sustainability. As we progress, we're eventually going to open this up to the public and allow anyone to participate. And ultimately, we want individuals to feel like they have the motivation and resources to make a difference in their own lives. And also for Lake Oswego, establishing an example for other cities to follow so they can sort of follow in our footsteps. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I think I'm handing it off to Jay and Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Hey, I'm Paul Soper, member of the Sustainability Advisory Board for a number of years now. So the fifth area that we focused on here is really taking a long-term view and monitoring and advocating state legislation affecting the sustainability and climate-related considerations. So for the purposes of this discussion, the big one is House Bill 2001, which we can remind ourselves abolishes single-family zoning in Oregon in cities over 25,000 population. So this truly is a paradigm shift in how we will develop and redevelop our neighborhoods in the coming years. And it's an incredible tool for the city to help really shape our urban form and decide what shape and character our city wants to be going forward. And we hope and trust that the city is proactive in using House Bill 2001 to its advantage. It truly is a unique tool that the state has given us. So from a sustainability lens and as part of the purview of our board, we've really highlighted 3 areas that we think will be affected by House Bill 2001. The first being tree protection. Of course, as the density increases, those larger building footprints may call for the removal of additional trees. And we just want the tree protection to really be in concert with what the goals of House Bill 2001 are, which is more attainable, more accessible housing for more people. And we think there's a happy medium there that can be found. Certainly everybody, and Mayor Buck mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, certainly everybody loves our tree canopy. It's an incredible asset that we have. Certainly from the environmental standpoint, the physical beauty and the sustainability of our neighborhood is largely based on our tree canopy. Secondly, walkability, with the increased density, I think the success of a lot of these housing types that are to come in the future will be based on how well they connect to other amenities, and I think that connectivity, alternative modes of transportation, bike lanes, safe sidewalks, safe routes to school, they will all be part of the success of this story as to how we use House Bill 2001 to responsibly grow our urban conditions. And finally, deconstruction versus demolition. And as a board, we've talked about this for a number of years, and the benefits of deconstruction we've always tried to put out there and be positive about. There will be more demolition as there is occurring now, as there is occurring in my neighborhood. The economics will drive that, and the zoning will drive that into the future. And we would like the city to focus and perhaps create additional incentives for deconstruction. I think the environmental aspects of diverting usable materials from the landfills are clear, and certainly works into the goals of what the Sustainability Board is about in terms of the built environment. So the city can certainly minimize the environmental impacts of demolition by promoting deconstruction as an alternate form of taking buildings down. So those 3 areas as areas to focus on in regards to House Bill 2001. And I believe now I'm going to pass it over to Kathleen to share some brief thoughts about the gas-powered landscape equipment.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Kathleen Weens. And we wanted to thank you so much for your recent award of the electric landscaping equipment contract. So we just think that's just a great step in the right direction. So we really appreciate that contract that was awarded. And then just as a side note that the Lake Oswego Sustainability Network is going to be, they're doing monthly forums now that started with 2021. And on May 13th, they're going to be doing an electric landscaping equipment forum about how communities are transitioning to electric equipment. And we'll have Dan Mabe, he's the CEO and president of the American Green Zone Alliance. He's an expert on the state of commercial electric landscaping equipment and how communities are moving in that direction. So thank you again, and we're so glad to be here.
Jay, I believe that you also had something planned, or
Yeah, Paul kind of jumped right ahead, but just kind of a summary for everybody that the past 12 months have been an important example of climate change and the interconnection of the world. Just 12 months ago, all of us on this meeting first heard about a virus from somewhere around the world infecting a Lake Oswego school district employee. And I think none of us had the clue of the impact that would have both globally, let alone in our city. At the end of this summer, impact of warmer summers and climate change came alive for us all with record wildfires. And the city was placed under stage 1 evacuation alert, which shook a lot of people. Evacuees from the nearby communities, Estacada, Molalla, brought their horses and farm animals over to the hunt club, and were living with their animals, and they were living out of their car with the shirts in their back. It really brought home to me that, you know, the times have changed, and it was pretty shocking that that fire came as far as it did, and we're lucky in Lake Oswego and Oregon City, West Lynn, that the wind stopped that day. The smoke during that wildfire forced all of us to shelter in place, and you know, for some of us it was a little bit easier to do, but you know, elderly and things like that, it was much harder. And then we just followed that up by a nice series of good windstorms, ice storms, knocking the power out for pretty much all of us on this phone call today. And many of these events seem out of our control, but they're not. And the things that we've been talking about here today are both direct and indirect impacts. And it's something that we, as a board, really encourage you to think about. And a lot of good ideas, you know, whether it's the sustainability impact from city regulations that are put in place, promoting EV vehicles for the city fleets, or things like House Bill 2001 and other House bills coming in. What's the impact that we know what the impact is on the surface, but what's the sub impact on it, and how is it going to affect the community for the future? So with that, I'll turn it back to you guys.
Thank you, Stephanie, and all of the SAB members. I think what we were hoping to do now is just open it up for questions from the mayor and city councilors, either of me or of members of our board, and just have more of an open discussion about how we're going to implement this sustainability and climate action plan that we've had as an adopted document since last May. So
Great.
I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Ms. Slepian. Thank you all for the great report and the presentation today. And we'll start a first question off from Councilor Mance.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for the excellent work you've done, many of you over a number of years. Thank you so much. I quickly will run through a few questions that I have. I'm particularly interested in, we have a goal of looking at fire, such as fire pits and fireworks. And within the climate action plan, under natural resources, we are in the process of completing our urban forestry plan, which I think will all fit together sustainably, holistically, so that we can look at these things not as silos individually, but I can't say it as articulately as Stephanie said it, but that we take a whole approach to whatever we're doing with these actions. So one question that I did have was and I think this again came from Stephanie, and that's the financial impacts of whatever it is that we're doing. For example, if we are looking at something that will impact the use of fireworks, making sure that people understand what would happen on the converse if there were to be a fire in Lake Oswego, or the cost of impacts of using gas vehicles. What exactly does that cost a household as opposed to using an EV? I think that really makes a valid point, especially in informatics. So I don't know if that's a part, I guess it's more of a statement than a question, so I apologize for that. I'm just going to move through my things here, and we can talk offline because I know others want to speak as well. This one is for Benjamin. Benjamin, thank you. I love this plan. It reminds me of things that we already do in the city with regards to water or backyard habitat certification. I think it's excellent. My question for you is, have you heard of a program? I believe that they do it in England. They may do it in other countries, but they've had a great pushing at looking at food on the front end and how people purchase and consume food, and how they can cut down on the waste. The point being that apparently most of the waste is on the front end. It's not that people aren't composting, it's that they're overbuying and then they're composting food that they wouldn't necessarily look at. Have you looked at anything along those lines?
We have to some degree. I haven't heard of that specific program you're referencing. We definitely be interested in it though. We definitely have a large focus on eliminating waste. So that sounds really interesting.
Okay, thanks. And then finally on EVs, and I don't quite know who to address this to. Part of the problem, and it will have to, I guess, eventually come from the county, come from the legislature, is how do we maintain our roads, which EVs use, in a world where we're not using gasoline and charging a gas tax. This has been a long ongoing debate with minds greater than mine at levels much higher levels of government than us. So again, back to what Stephanie addressed, that fiscal side of things. What would it take in order to maintain our roads, to create that resilient infrastructure from that standpoint by not having a gas tax? And again, that was less of a question than just throwing things out there. So I apologize if I phrased this all as questions to folks. If somebody has a quick and easy answer to the gas tax and road question, I'd love to hear it. If not, again, we can talk offline.
Mr. Chandler, did you have a response to something Councilor Manns asked?
Yeah, just to pass on, I've heard some ongoing proposals.
Mr. Chandler, I am so sorry. I muted you by accident. Let's try to lower your hand.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, sorry. No, I just wanted to pass on. I have heard some proposals on how to do this, and they revolve around, it would either be mileage based, that there could be done through Wi-Fi, like take Tesla the way that they can connect once they're parked, that once a month there's a download of how many miles you've covered, and that would be, say a mileage tax, or a higher fee at registration time, and then you're free the rest of the time, or a combination thereof. And then you get into the hybrid situations like the state's looking at for the interstates in the Portland area being toll.
Right.
So I think we're probably going to end up in some sort of a hybrid fee system in the end down the road.
Great, thank you for that. And once again, thank you all for the excellent work and the excellent report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Manns. Councilor Rapp?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Slepian, great report. Go Eagles. So a couple questions. I'm going to start with one and then go with the other one after the answer. Has the Sustainability Committee looked into any kind of incentive system to encourage all our students in Lake Oswego to ride or walk to school? Anybody?
I could probably answer that, unless I'm trying to think. Ben or Kelsey, you guys might have some input. The short answer is no, simply because the SAB hasn't had a whole lot of overlap with the school district, other than our youth members that we have every year. But that issue of school transportation has certainly been something that we have discussed in our own meetings, whether that's through supporting safe routes to school, better pathways so that kids can get to school safer, electric school buses, no idling. That issue of how all of our youth are getting to and from school has definitely been a big topic of conversation in the past. I believe that a lot of the work around that, though, is the Sustainability Network has a schools committee composed of parents who work with the school district. And I think a lot of the conversation around transportation to and from school has been done at that community level. Stephanie, I can't remember if it was you or Sarah who was involved in some of that. And Ben and Kelsey, I know that we have talked about this as well. So if any of you would like to chime in.
Because one of the things I was thinking about is well, I know the two entities are separate, right? And there's not a lot of ways we can really kind of, you can't do their work, they can't do ours. However, I feel like this is, if we're going to spend money on a sustainability plan and different factors within that plan, why not allocate some of that? You don't have to work with the school district to do that. We can incentivize through the city through dollars we're all going to spend to do that work ourselves, which I also think will kind of go a long ways to help build that partnership with the school district. But there's a lot of kids, right? And that's a lot of feet that can make an impact. So
what you have done, Counselor, though, is you have prioritized having a conversation about actually building out the pathways to schools. And so while I don't know that you can deal with the bus and auto part of the transportation to schools, you can make it safe for kids to walk and bike to school.
Yeah, I think there are ways you can we can look into it. Second question is, my gosh, in the 3 months I've been a city councilor, I've probably gotten 500 emails, not 500, maybe 100 emails about people wanting to get rid of gas leaf blowers. I've never seen that much. That's an incredible amount of writing. I'm curious because I'm wondering if everybody's really concerned about it because everyone's stuck at home doing work at home because of COVID, or have we been getting equal amounts of emails every year, even prior to COVID? And so I was wondering if you could just answer that question for me. Do we think it's really related to COVID and everyone's just hearing it outside, or has this been an ongoing complaint?
It's been ongoing. It certainly has increased since everybody's been at home, but that has also been marked with an increase about a lot more awareness of what our neighbors are doing overall. But the leaf blower thing has definitely been around for a while. I know that SAB started working on this in late 2018, early 2019. So this topic has definitely been sticking around for a while, and it's only really exacerbated in this past year.
If there's any way, I don't know if it's possible, just to if you can send us all a number of how many emails we got on the leaf blower issue last year versus this year, I think that'd just go a long way for us to really know if this is really the whole community is concerned about it, or by the time we all go back to work, people are going to stop, and not all of them, but some people are going to stop complaining about it. So anyway, thank you for the answers. Appreciate it.
May I add a little something to Councillor Raff's question regarding walkability? The Forest Highlands Neighborhood Association applied for a small grant to improve a walkway to down Toma Road to the high school, and were turned down because the city felt that it was a responsibility of the school to fund that kind of thing. So that might have been helpful if we could maybe change that.
I think that we're working on the school district on that pathway. I think that's the one, Ms. Bennett, isn't that the one that we were?
Yeah, I think the school district it's 100% on school district property. So I think the school district and the city are going to partner together to try to get that done.
That's very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Pullman. Councilor Burdick.
Thank you, Mayor. I have kind of one question and one comment question, but first I want to start. I have the privilege of being the counselor liaison this year to this magnificent group, and I just want to point out how impressive they are and how much knowledge we have on this this committee. So thank you all very much for all of your dedication, because you spend hours of your time and it's very appreciated. My first question is just, I'm hoping one of you can kind of explain a little bit further, and I know it was spoken about at the meeting last night, but explain to the audience and the other counselors how EVs were used during the storm, because I know it was very informative to me to hear all the amazing ways that an EV vehicle is used. So if you guys could share that, that's my first thing I'd love to hear.
Okay, here's some. We heard about people using their Teslas. They could put them into camp mode and literally sleeping out in their garage in their Tesla, and only using maybe 17% of the battery power overnight, but they stayed nice and comfy in their air-conditioned little pod. The other things would be, say in the future with EVs, they could be used to actually be an emergency generator to keep your fridge going or something like that. If I think it was the Nissan Leaf does have that ability that you can plug it in and run other items off of it. So we're probably going to see more of that come as the various automakers become competitive to add options. And other items like that during the ice storm that you could actually, I guess in some ways, thinking about it, you could think that your EV in the garage could be your escape pod when the grid power goes out.
And I think one of the other things we talked about too, to add to what Buzz was talking about, is natural gas generators would kick on in the instance that we had with the ice storm. Would that work in the instance of an earthquake versus a solar array, where you have a battery and or your car acting as your battery source? So building in some of that solar resilience in addition to the gas or wood-fired fireplaces, things like that, I think was something else that we talked about, which is a very interesting concept. We have natural gas fireplace, and so did okay during the power outage. But if that gas line was broken, it's not really something I want to turn on with my family in the house. But if it's solar, not a problem. Not a problem.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that. I found that to be very insightful personally. And my second question is actually for Benjamin, and it's kind of a question comment, but one of the things I'm hoping that's being looked at when you're doing the residential sustainability certification is addressing the importance of restoring wood windows that might be like pre-1950 and using storm windows with those to increase its efficiency versus replacing with a replacement window, because some of those old wood windows can actually last hundreds of years if they're well maintained, versus a replacement window, you're lucky if you get 20 years out of it and then it's in the landfill. So hopefully you've looked at that. If not, I'd love to have a conversation with you offline about that. I've got loads of research I'm happy to share.
Yeah, that sounds really insightful. We've looked into Windows, but I think most of our stuff does involve either replacing it or packing up the hole so there's no airflow getting into the house. So that sounds very informative. I'd love to have an email about that or a discussion with you later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Windland.
Well, I will echo Councillor Burdick's comments about what an impressive group you are. And when you read through all the different reports that we have for this council packet, a lot of work is being done and you have a lot of work ahead of you, and we appreciate all your efforts for sure. And just know that government doesn't move as fast as the private world sometimes. So have patience, but we'll get there. It's a community effort. One of the things that I enjoyed reading through the whole packet was that you've made some impactful progression in your work over the years. And I think people need to know, oftentimes you hear about what we're supposed to do, but I think it might be helpful as part of the communication to have some sort of a scorecard, sort of if there's metrics or anything that we've done as a city, like the idea that Matt said we have 1,500 EVs in Lake Oswego. I think that's a wonderful statistic, and it might be interesting to see. 5 years ago, we had 150, and we kind of move up the trail. And I don't know whether you can get the data or not, but some of the milestones that you've been reaching and helping to change people in Lake Oswego, we're kind of an A-type community, and we love to kind of, I won't say compete all the time, but we like being part of a train that's moving in a direction. And so if you give us a progress report, you might say, of some of the things that we've accomplished and what, you know, the directions that we're going in, I think people would really be more engaged in saying, hey, you know what, I'm helping to move, get on the train and move it along. And so you've just got so many things that you're working on, how you compile it and put it into a, you know, a graph or a chart or something, but that might be helpful. And the Hello LO is a great tool, as long as we've got a great communications team in Lake Oswego in the city that is dying really for great information, positive things to put into our communications tool. So that might be one part. The other question that I have for you is on the EV part. When you say that we want more public kind of partnership in providing EV recharging stations, and I will tell you, this is feedback from I get from different people. They go, well, I guess the incentive is for me to buy an EV so that the city or whoever is going to charge my car for me, so I don't have to pay for fuel. It's great if we have 50 people doing that. If we all of a sudden get 40,000 people with EVs, what is the expectation, or what's the goal of providing those, and how do we, you know, somebody said, is the city gonna pay for my gas now too if I have a, you know, are they in the energy business? So I guess that dialogue or some sort of explanation, I don't know how you see that rolling out in the future.
Can jump in there. You know, we've been having a lot of conversations with PGE around EVs and expanding EV infrastructure. And so it's a combination. PGE does provide some infrastructure of their own. They have something in Milwaukee and Portland called an electric avenue that PGE is paying for, not the city, which can charge a number of vehicles at once. So far, we haven't really provided a lot of free charging to community members. So the charging station we have on A was paid for by Tesla through their destination charging program. It is hooked up to a city meter, so we are paying for the electricity. We're not paying, but we haven't paid for the installation. And then the other charging stations that we have at Public Works and at City Hall, people need to pay to use it. We don't make any money off of it. They're just paying the rate per kilowatt hour that we pay for our energy. And I do think that is probably the model that we will stick with. We haven't provided free charging as a benefit to city employees, and we haven't really discussed providing free public charging. But what we would like to do is to increase the amount of charging infrastructure that is visible for people. And I think the visibility is the important part, that people see that there is a place to plug in their vehicle, and it builds confidence in buying that type of vehicle. But I think the demand for free charging has gone down as people realize that the overall cost of ownership for an EV is much lower than the overall cost of ownership for a gas-powered vehicle. So there is a willingness to pay, you know, per kilowatt hour. That being said, there are a number of free charging options around the city that we are currently not paying for, like the DC fast chargers at Bank of America are a good example. The Electrify America program, which is paid for through the Volkswagen Diesel Settlement Fund, covers those costs. So there are some options out there for free charging that wouldn't come at the city's expense, but rather at either Volkswagen or PG&E's expense.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
I think just a couple other things to add to that, and Buzz, maybe you have something to add too, but we've been looking a lot at multifamily EV charging stations, and that's certainly, I wouldn't put that on the city to pay for, but to help the builders sort of implement that with their build process would be something that we would look for. I think that could be something that could benefit us, especially as we get into House Bill 2001 and we maybe start seeing more multifamily facilities. And then the other thing that we talked about, actually last night it was implementing that into new builds and remodel construction, wiring in electric charging within a home setting. So it's not the city paying for it again, but it's the city sort of, and I know Paul kind of reminded us that the city doesn't necessarily control building standards, but are there things that we can do to incent or encourage builders to bring EVs into single family homes as well, without necessarily paying for the charging itself?
Thank you.
And just to follow up with what Matt was saying, to give me a thought for a moment for Councilor's question on how to pay for roads without the gas tax, is that the charging for street side chargers and everything, there could be a fee on there that helps pay for road taxes and that sort of thing. Another avenue to generate revenue.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Nguyen?
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to see discussion about electric vehicles. I think that I was recruited, I was, what other term is, but I was made a believer in electric vehicles. I was speaking with Duke Council, if you're listening out there. He was the one that really sold me on it, and I was very skeptical, but I will say that I've become a believer. And I think as much as I, as more and more I drive it, I really certainly appreciate just the convenience of it. So there's a plug for electric vehicles there. But I also want to say it's not just Teslas. There is a myriad right now I see on the road. Sometimes you might not even know it's an electric vehicle. There's Chevy Bolts and there's Volkswagen versions as well, and there's Audis and things. So I think that's something that I guess maybe as an aside, you don't have to answer it now, but I'm just curious to know that 1,500 electric vehicles in Lake Oswego, does that include the other brands as well too? That's not a question I really need to have answered, but I wanted to ask the question about the issue about city-owned vehicles. I know that we're talking about owning vehicles and that the technology may be becoming obsolete sooner rather than later, because it is a fast-moving industry with everything's really dictated by battery capacity. Have you looked into options in terms of maybe instead of city-owned vehicles, maybe having some sort of leased vehicles? I don't know if the city leases any vehicles or not. Certainly not for the trucks, not for the big maintenance trucks, I thought, but maybe for smaller vehicles that tend to not carry any sort of payload or beyond just the passenger and things like that. Second thing I wanted to ask too was in terms about like shared vehicles. I know that in some more urban areas there's an option for shared vehicles. I don't know if when we're thinking about how we have vehicles parked on the street and such, if there's maybe even some sort of incentive that we can offer if we have like I don't know what they call them anymore, but you pay as you go and you return the vehicle back to the site. But maybe we can, especially certainly the more areas where there's less parking, if there's a way we can encourage the more shared vehicles, more shared vehicle usage, and maybe further incentivize electric vehicles in particular instead of the ICE, the internal combustion engine type of vehicles. So those are some questions I had for the SAB.
Does someone want to answer Councilor Nguyen's question about lease versus purchase?
That's a question I'd recommend that we float back to the departments that actually own fleet vehicles, as opposed to asking SAB members to be experts on that. Some of our vehicles we turn over pretty rapidly, but some of our vehicles we have for a long time. And so leases might work for some kinds and not for others. But let me ask them that question, Counselor, and have them report to Jenny and have Jenny get back to all of you, as opposed to putting SAB members in a position of knowing that level of detail. And then Jenny, I don't know if we've looked at any of the shared vehicle services. I know that they require a certain level of sort of density to be a going concern, which might be the big issue here in Lake Oswego.
Yep, that has been we have looked at it in the past, and they do require a certain level of density that we are not at yet in Lake Oswego, but that's not to say with all of, the new developments like I'm spacing the Mercantile, etc. Like those big mixed use, high density, a few more of those and we might get there. But right now we haven't quite had the density for them to be that interested.
What I wanted to ask about was we have these overarching goals of by 2035, city buildings will have no net emissions from electricity. By 2045, city buildings will have no net emissions from on-site combustion fuels. By 2050, city reaches carbon neutrality through reducing or offsetting the carbon emissions. In your all's opinion, is the plan that we've set forth put us on that path?
I think that's an excellent question. I don't know if we can if we can fully dive into it. I mean, I think it's certainly worth digging into again continuously, the high performance building standards and treating it really as a living document, because as technology changes and as kind of the building standards kind of progress towards those goals, I think we just continuously have to reevaluate where we are in our building stock and how we can make these incremental changes to make those goals more and more feasible.
I think that there's some new options out there for us that will help us get there. So for example, when PGE unrolls the Community Green Tariff Program, which would basically allow every resident, renter or not, apartment or not, to purchase 100% renewable energy from PGE. Well, obviously that will make our scope 2 emissions essentially zero, assuming everybody participated. I mean, from residences, not commercial, because that's different. But that would have a huge impact on getting to that goal just through buying renewable energy credits. But of course, as Paul has mentioned, and I know that you have mentioned, Mayor, transportation and buildings are the greatest source of our emissions. And so in short answer, to get to that goal, I mean, I know that that relates to buildings, but for us to really reduce our emissions, to take a very close look at transportation and active transportation in particular.
On that, Jenny, on my screen you're cutting out, so I don't know if
Jenny's frozen. Oh, there she is.
I'm back. I don't know where I lost you. I was just talking. So, but I believe what I was saying was that buildings and transportation are the two areas of the plan that we need to look at the most closely if we're going to reach those targets.
Yeah. That was my other question. I mean, great section on EVs, of course, in the climate plan, but no mention of active transportation. Of course, we have our other council goal of investing in pathway and bikeway transportation, within the community. Seems like it could be reinforced if it was put forth in this plan. And then, of course, these other goals around connectivity outside of the community and how we can encourage. I mean, I think what Councilor Raff's talking about, of course, safe routes to school, which we have as a council goal invested in that. Then just broader goals of transportation, both within and then outside the community, and goals that we probably will achieve with our other regional partners, really looking at the transportation system. But again, I think it's just critical and really, in my opinion, cannot move fast enough on these goals, and appreciate all of your work, and just want to ensure that, like I'm sure all of you do as well, that we have some measure of accountability and measurability built in. I think Councilor Windland was talking about as well as, we want to see we're investing time, energy, money into this. We want to see that we're doing things, which I think the residential certification program is great because it shows people through a point system and that they're reaching goals and doing things. But then, of course, as a city, so I don't know if we want to, together here today, set some kind of a time to report back. And I mean, how are we doing on these goals? We've talked about like EVs. I mean, just as an example, in the city for so long, and yet, whenever it comes time to lease and buy new vehicles, sometimes we get an EV, but it wasn't that many years ago that we went from EVs back to internal combustion. So, I would at least have an interest in making sure that these things that we're putting down on paper that we're actually following through on, and knowing, in some short check-in time that, we're actually making progress, and that the good work of everyone on the SAB and the policy advice you're giving us is actually being followed and implemented. So hopefully we can do some kind of check back. And then continued evaluation of what else in regards to the building, in regards to transportation, seeing this as a starting point, what else can we be doing? And of course, as we recognize all these things as living documents. So I don't know how the SAB members feel about that as you continue your work, being kind of our board to evaluate progress and
I think to briefly answer your regional question, Clackamas County is working on their own climate action plan, which I hope through that process, some of those regional transportation questions will be answered. And I'm hoping that because this is a living document, once Clackamas County has finished their work, we can not combine, but integrate those plans better, so that those issues that are kind of just outside the scope of what Lake Oswego can accomplish, we can't fix our transportation system without the help of TriMet and without the help of Metro. We can bring those in working through under Clackamas County's climate action plan too. So I'm looking to that to be a very complementary tool for us. And then I'll let SAB talk about checking in, but I think the idea, and I know that Paul, I think we talked about this very early in the process of this being a living document, was that we would give annual progress reports to the city council on where we are, but I'll let somebody from SAB speak to that.
Does someone want to speak to progress?
Sure. Sorry. I was looking for my unmute button. We did decide amongst ourselves as a board that we wanted to have a look at the goals that we outlined to make sure they were the so-called SMART goals, specific, measurable, et cetera, and that we could report back on those. An annual progress report is among the things that we've talked about. And I think we really just have we've hit the ground running. And so it is certainly on our list of things that we want to do. I don't think we have a timeline yet set for when we might have that to you, but it is something that we are aware of the need for that. And I think as Councilor Wendland said, we want to celebrate the successes, and part of that is sharing the progress and sharing how far we have come. But we need to know how far have we come in order to share those details. So absolutely, we agree, and we've talked about that. So we look forward to working on that and providing those updates.
Okay, thank you. And then just real quick, there's one very specific goal in here is that was set back in a resolution, this 1628, that we reach this 1 megawatt solar goal by 2021. So it is, it is 20. So.
Yes, the time went quickly on that one. So we know that we need to do some work to find out where we are and to identify, what our next steps are. If we have not yet accomplished the goal we set out, what are the steps that we'll take to get there? So we will be looking at that as part of our update.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilor Boop.
Thank you. I was going to ask the resolution. So, but just, to say thank you to the SAB. You are doing a wonderful work. They already said what I was going to say. So thank you. Yes.
And then members of the council, we have, the recommendation from Ms. Slepian in the report, the five items. Hearing your comments today, it sounds like everyone is on board and just kind of looking for a head nodding. Are we good proceeding with the direction as outlined in the staff report and giving her the thumbs up? Okay. Okay. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if we could convince all the high schoolers to take the bus and not have their parents drive their cars or drive their own cars, I bet you we could cut down in emissions in Lake Oswego by half. Just saying.
I know. I hear you, Councilor Wendland. All right, members of the SAB, thank you so much, for taking time this beautiful afternoon to be here and all of the work. I know I've sat in on a couple of your meetings. I know you put so much good work, and we really do value your expertise. We're so lucky to have all of you volunteering your time, and you do make the city a better place, and we really appreciate you all being here today. So thank you all very much. Ms. Slepian, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. So that will conclude that study session, and we're now going to adjourn the meeting of the City Council, and I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Redevelopment Agency. And our first item on our Redevelopment Agency agenda is a North Anchor project update. And so Mr. Sin is here with our partners on this project. Ms. Zahn, good to see you. And I see you brought some folks, a couple of gentlemen here with you. Great to see you too as well. I'll let you introduce everyone and take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Buck, and members of the board. I'm Sid Sin, the redevelopment manager for the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency. And this afternoon, I have Sarah Zahn with Urban Development Partners and some of the design team from Hacker. And before I turn it over to Sarah to introduce the design team, just wanted to touch bases on a couple of things. The first being, this is just an update as to where the design team is on the overall design, both for the hotel and for the residential, which is a little further along. And also wanted to let you know that we do expect coming back to the board on April 20th. The staff report noted April 6th, but the UDP team would like to have a couple extra weeks to work on the design and really try to think through some of the issues that have been raised and try to address those things. But at least at this meeting, Sarah and her team will be able to update the board on where we are. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sid, and good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. Good to see you all again. Thank you for having us back. I have two team members with me this afternoon, Chris Hodney and Scott Barton-Smith, both members of the Hacker Design team. So they're going to be co-presenting with me a little bit this afternoon. And I think Chris is actually going to take the driver's seat in regards to the presentation. So I'll let him bring that up right now. Perfect. Thank you, Chris. So we're here today, sort of, as you know, from the last time we were visiting with you, we're engaged in our schematic design process on both the residential and the hotel properties right now. Chris is the design director for the residential project, and Scott is the design director for the hotel. And we wanted to give you a brief update on where we are relative to both designs today. And as Sid mentioned, we're playing a little bit of catch up on our hotel design right now, which is going very quickly and very, we're making a lot of decisions very rapidly. So we don't have a lot to show you yet today, but coming back to you on the 20th in about a month, we will have a lot more information to show you about the hotel. Just know that we are engaged, really in deep with our hotel partner on making a lot of decisions about how that hotel program and massing and fitting everything in a hotel is it's a lot of work and a fun exercise at the same time, but that's ongoing. But we do have a few updates to share with you today. So Chris, I'll have you move to the next slide. So before I turn it over to our design team to talk to you about the design itself, I just wanted to kind of tell you where we've been since we were together a month ago. We've done a lot of work in that time. On March 3rd, we had a great meeting with the first edition Forest Hills Neighborhood Association and talked them through the project, predominantly focused on the residential project, but had about an hour and a half meeting with them and really talked quite a bit about where we were headed with the design and got some great feedback from them. On March 9th, we had a check-in with Councilor Burdick on the design, which was really helpful and great to be able to talk to her about a couple of the things that she raised in the prior meeting and talk about our approach to some of those. On March 11th, we had a follow-up check-in with the Neighborhood Association board chairs on a variance request that we are planning on making around the residential project, which we were going to describe to you in a little bit more detail today. We vetted that with them on March 11th. And then through the last month, we've had a number of check-ins with city staff on zoning code and some of the questions as the design has continued to progress. We've continued to refine design to address some of the community comments we've heard. And we've also had a very successful integrated process with Mosaic and our design team on the hotel design. So just to reorient you, and I know you've all seen these slides before, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. This is to just remind you that parcel A is our hotel project, and then parcels B and C are our multifamily projects. So that's the orientation with B Avenue and First Street. And next slide. And I wanted to just spend a minute talking about parking because this is always a topic of great interest to everyone, and is a little bit complicated in the downtown design area because of the different parking ratios required for different types of uses. So this is a little bit of a complicated chart, but we are looking at different required spaces for hotel rooms, retail, and residential units. And further, we have different requirements depending on what type of retail we're doing. So one of the tricky parts that we're sort of trying to assess as we move forward is that we don't know exactly what our retail, especially at the multifamily, is going to be yet. And we probably won't know until well into and maybe even post-construction. So we have to make some assumptions and accept potentially some limitations around our parking as a result of not knowing exactly who our retail partners are going to be. And we'll do our best to identify our retail tenants as early as we can, but as you know, that's a process that often plays out a little bit later in the development cycle just because of the nature of retail and how they make decisions. So this just shows a preliminary analysis of where we are with the parking today. So we have two parcels and we look at the parking separately for these different projects. Parcel A, our hotel project, we're currently required to build 58 parking spaces, and that's in a combination of the spaces required for the hotel rooms and then the spaces required for the retail. And right now we're assuming about a 2,300 square foot full service restaurant at the ground floor. And that is an intensive use in terms of parking. So we have 18 spaces that are required for that use for a total of 58 spaces. We are currently providing 58 spaces in our plan. So we are right at the number that we need to be at. And as you know, parking on these smaller sites can be complicated. We're currently assessing on parcel A, a valet stacker system in order to accommodate all those cars. So that is how we're achieving the parking requirement on the hotel site. And then parking B and C, you'll see we have a range of requirement here, and that's because of that retail sort of unknown that we still have. So on the low end, we would be required to produce 76 parking spaces. And on the high end, as many as 111. And 111 would be only if we tenanted that entire retail with full service food tenants, which is unlikely. So that's kind of our worst case scenario in terms of the most we would have to produce. We are currently providing 108 parking spaces. So we're doing pretty well. We're getting really close to what we would need at our worst case scenario. And currently that plan is 91 spaces off street, which is within the parking garages at parcels B and C. Of those 91 off-site spaces, 23 of them will be in a parking stacker matrix. So those are that matrix system that would be used only by residential tenants. And then we are able to count 17 on-street parking spaces toward our maximum parking count. So this is subject to change, obviously, as our program continues to change. As you can see on the residential, there's different parking ratios depending on the configuration of the units. So even that could change as our residential unit count or mix changes as we continue through design. And certainly as we think about our retail parking, you know, that range is pretty wide. We're trying to achieve as many as we can and have as much flexibility as we can for future retail parking. And I think with that, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about the residential design.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And hello, everybody. Thanks for having us. Glad to be here and present our update. This is the ground floor plan, the retail floor plan along B, and I won't stay here too long, but just as a reminder, this here you can see the structured parking in both parcels B and C that Sarah was talking about. And then the blue spaces are the current design for the separate retail tenants that we have in both buildings. I think that what we wanted to talk to you the most today is give you some updates on the refinements to the design we've been making since last month. And it's probably easier to see that in 3D, but I'm happy to come back to that.
Yeah.
So here's the current sort of raised aerial view from first and B of the current design. And the majority of what we've been doing this month as far as design refinement has been really focused at on how can we respond to some of the primary feedback that we got from both the neighborhood association and some of the comments were echoed with the city council last month. Primarily, that's the way the multifamily buildings are addressing the corners of State and of First. And then there was some talk about just the articulation of the roof line, basically the rhythm of gables along B and First. The most notable change that we're proposing that we've developed this month and been sharing with everybody is to the ground floor of the corners themselves. So on the right, you can see our previous design, which we presented last month, where we were holding the corner with the retail. So we were bringing the retail all the way to the corner of First and B. And then we had a somewhat recessed retail entry with a canopy, but along First, we were really fronting that mostly with storefront windows. And then that transitioned to the north into planting where we have units close to the ground. We've made the change in response to the comments and feedback we received to cut in a large recessed retail plaza or retail court. So there's an opportunity to provide a fairly large opportunity for outdoor seating that really opens up the corner in a very dramatic way that we think is really in line with the architecture as well. So here's a view if you're walking down B Avenue from our hotel towards the property. And the space is about 30 feet wide by 12 feet deep, and it's about 13 feet tall right now. And it's southwest facing. And we're thinking this is a really good sized space for outdoor seating for that primary retail tenant. We think this is definitely a core tenant location given the importance of this intersection. What we're imagining right now is that you would have the entire space or court would be flat, and it would be accessed accessibly off of the corner at B. And then because we have significant site slope both along B and at First, we're having to deal with some level of stepping towards the corners of that space. We're imagining right now that this sort of back glass area, which is kind of dark in this rendering, this would be your primary entry door for that retail tenant. So during the year, even if there's seating in the space, there would be steps down right here. And of course, people would go through accessible entry off of B as well. But if this were a restaurant in the future, for example, you could imagine that we would design it so this larger glass wall would be fully operable, or as operable as the doors would allow us to make them. So we get this great indoor-outdoor connection and really activate that space. We're also proposing that to deal with the grade change, we'll provide a planter and a site wall that grows out of the ground, and at the corner actually becomes an integrated opportunity for public seating on the sidewalk side. This is sort of picking up on a pattern. There's a number of locations in the district where at the corners, at the property corners, there's some sort of a site wall with oftentimes there's a bench, or sometimes there's a piece of public art there as well. Just a moment for pedestrians to stop and gather, or look at art, or just even take a rest. And then lastly, we've chosen to keep the architecture up above, reinforcing the corner, so the building still projects all the way to the corner in this really dramatic architectural move. And we like that because it's a southwest facing space, so you'll actually get some really great daylight, particularly in the summer. But we also like the idea of the building not only providing shade, but providing weather protection, so this space can actually be active in all seasons as well. And then on the corner of State, in our Parcel C building, we're taking sort of a similar approach, but treating it slightly differently just because of the nature of traffic along State and the nature of our curb cut. Here you can see it's a similar sort of architectural move. We don't have the challenges of the grade, so this sidewalk is roughly flat. It's fairly flat. And given the fact that State is a very busy street at certain times of day, we do have this wider sidewalk, but we were wanting to provide a different opportunity for making a very comfortable place for people to sit outside, and also try to activate it as much as possible with pedestrian activity along the sidewalk. And so in this case, we've opted to not provide a site wall here, and actually just leave it flush with the sidewalk. So the idea is there you have more flexibility and openness for pedestrian traffic in and out and through the retail spaces, and then also more opportunity and flexibility for how the retail tenant will provide outdoor seating. The other thing to point out here, which is just a small refinement since that we didn't necessarily focus on last time, is at this intersection, you'll notice we don't have the large brick inlay at the bulb out. And that's because due to the bus turning radius at this intersection, we don't have the ability to do that large extension of the sidewalk. But we are suggesting that we would continue the brick inlay pattern within the tree and furnishing zone. And that directly picks up on a pattern that exists in the blocks immediately to our south. And then just for context, here's if you step catty corner across State and B, looking back at the developments, both developments, you can see how much more open that architectural move and creating that retail court feels compared to what was really more of a recessed entry court before. And the last comment I want to just touch on is Councilor Burdick had mentioned something about not being sure about the rhythm of the gables, particularly along First. I'll go back to this image. And we haven't changed the gables yet. We still feel pretty strongly that the gables we like the way that they're anchoring and creating a different building reading along First, and then simultaneously doing that along B as well to split up the two buildings. We did in our coordination meeting with Councilor Burdick, we did discuss how we actually have quite a bit of plane change between the gables because we are trying to make sure that massing is articulated at a scale that's appropriate for the district. And so what we wanted to point out is that each of these gables has a 2-foot plane change or offset. They also have this sort of 1-foot inset shadow line. There's a bit of depth. And then beyond that, the gables at the north side are even set back another 6 feet, and that's just to allow more planting. So we wanted to point out, particularly in this image, that we actually felt like the gables from a pedestrian standpoint were fairly articulated, and there was a bit of plane change, because we didn't really discuss that as much in the last meeting. And then the other thing we want to talk more about with you today is, to achieve the design as proposed, we actually are requesting a design, we're required to request a design variance. And the design variance we're asking for is to allow an extra story of uninhabitable space to be allowed on the site. And it's a fairly complicated issue, but from a code language perspective. But to sort of illustrate why we're asking for this, we've created, from all the public frontages, we've created comparison renderings of our proposed design with the variance compared to if we modified our design and our floor levels to meet the letter of the code, what would that look like? And I think that what you'll find is, looking at these images, we believe that the proposed design is still within the height limit. It's still within the allowed height limit. It's both designs are the same reading, so they both read as a 4-story building from all the public frontages. They're the same size. They're all the same size as far as inhabitable area and quantity of units. So there's no increase in developable area in this building right now. But we definitely believe that the proposed design with the variance, we would be able to provide a more engaging ground floor experience and be able to provide a design that's more consistent with the patterns of the district. And so looking at the first frontage, this is the south facade along B. On the left is our proposed design. On the right is a modified design without the variance. And what stands out here is there's a really strong pattern of the ground floor height within the downtown district. And it generally ranges, in retail buildings, excuse me, it generally ranges between 13 foot to 21 feet, which is largely due to the site slope that we're having to deal with as well. And here's some examples where the ground floor reading of some of these buildings is 14 to 18 feet in the Lakeview Village. This is the building where Harnish Properties is to the west of us. Again, 14 foot to 21 feet at the southwest corner, or southeast corner, excuse me. And then the windward itself is the same, where it's 13 feet along Second. And then as the sidewalk slopes down, it grows to about a 21 foot floor to floor reading at Salton's Draw. So the variance actually allows us to lower the reading of the first floor along B and of the building itself, and gets us right in that range where we would have a 14 foot floor to floor at the intersection of First, and then that would slope down to about 21 feet along the alley. Whereas if we modified our building, trying to make the building meet the letter of the code for number of stories, we actually end up with a taller frontage along B, where we're in the 20 foot range at the southwest corner, but it slopes, due to the slope, we grow to around 27. So it really starts to create an outlier, and we think the variance would allow us to provide a more sensitive building in that sense. And then also thinking about at the smaller pedestrian scale, where we, on the west side along First, where we have ground floor residential units meeting the sidewalk. Again, both scenarios have a very similar reading. They read as 4 stories of residential resting on a terracing landscape and stone base, which meets the sidewalk. And they're both within the height limit, you can see here. But what we believe is stronger is that the variance allows us to raise the not only set the units back away from the sidewalk, but also raise them up above the sidewalk, where you eliminate that sort of awkward sight line between someone's living room or dining room and the pedestrian who's walking by. So in this case, the variance would allow us to raise that finished floor up 2 or even 3 feet minimum above the sidewalk, to really eliminate that sideline. So the person inside the unit can entertain at their dining table or be sitting with their family in their living room, and they don't feel that they need to immediately shut the blinds all the time. And then passersby on the sidewalk also can look over and actually feel like they can enjoy the architecture, enjoy the beautiful landscaping and public art that we'll provide, rather than feeling like they're going to look into someone's private space. Without the variance, the challenge is that just due to the site slope and the particular grading of our site, the finished floor would actually be below grade at the northwest corner of the site, and then slowly grow out of the ground. So you can kind of see here the challenge from a privacy standpoint. And then lastly, I think the other opportunity we're seeing with the variance and just having a little more flexibility of that added height is along this frontage, is just more flexibility in what variety of plants we provide, so we can actually provide probably more effective screening and more visual interest to the pedestrians. And then also a little more flexibility on how we shape and where we step these walls as we consider where we're providing integrated seating as well. And with that, I'll move on to the update for the hotel.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott from Hacker. As Sarah mentioned, I'm leading the design on the hotel. As Sarah mentioned, we're working with our hotel operator, Mosaic, and we have been for a couple of weeks. And mostly what we've been working on is developing a program that makes most sense for Mosaic and for UDP operationally. At the same time, of course, we're trying to balance those operational demands with the vision for the city and specifically for this neighborhood to make a truly beautiful building that is unique and is a beacon on First that complements the multifamily building across the street. So we look forward to spending more time with you, as Sarah mentioned, next month, where we will showcase a lot of information about the hotel. But for today, we just have a couple of slides for you. Next slide, please, Chris. And the first is the ground floor here. So the ground floor focuses on a covered outdoor space in the southeast corner, and it says entrance terrace here. And that's kind of a bite out of the footprint of the building, but that is covered by the program above. So that's a large entry plaza that is covered. And that would be the entry into the lobby of the hotel on the left that goes up B Avenue and straight forward into the restaurant that lines the First Street side of the building. Now that entry terrace is also sized to be large enough for seasonal outdoor seating. So restaurant seating would actually be out on that corner, activating the pedestrian space. And that in a moment here, I'll show you a rendering of the feel and the scale for that outdoor space that we're likely to see. Now, the balance of the ground floor is going to be BOH, standing for back of house space, and that is both for the restaurant and for the hotel, reception and so forth. And because of the very steep slopes on this side as well, smaller footprint than the multifamily across the street, there's 20 feet of grade from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. Much of the northwest corner of the building that you see here is actually the footprint of the parking that Sarah described. And so the current thinking is that it's valet mechanized stacker parking. And so hotel guests would arrive on B Avenue, drop off at the curb and go directly through accessible entry into the lobby entry, and then a valet would take the car around into the alley and enter the stacker area. Next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. So this is an image looking northwest from the southeast corner, First being on our right and B being on our left. And that is that covered outdoor entry area and seasonal outdoor seating area. You can see the restaurant to the right, and we're going to look for ways to blur that line between interior and exterior with the restaurant. So it really feels like a continuation of the restaurant space out into the seasonal outdoor seating area. And then to the left, you see the lobby of the hotel, both addressing that corner space. that's what we have for you today. Are there any questions about the hotel?
Mayor, do you want to hold questions until we're through the presentation, or?
If there's more, yes.
I was just going to give a quick update on the schedule, and then.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay? Okay. You've seen this slide again before, I believe, but wanted to just give you a quick update on where we are relative to the design process. So in the middle of this slide, you can see the blue lines, the horizontal blue lines that really are describing where we are in the design process. We're about halfway through our schematic design process on both the multifamily and the hotel. So you'll see there's a little kind of negative space in the design process on the multifamily for schematic design, and that's because we're trying to play catch up on the hotel, which is what you're kind of hearing about today, is we're not totally caught up yet, but we're working really hard to get caught up on the design process for the hotel and the multifamily. And the purpose for that is that we are focused on getting both of those aligned for land use. So our team has spent a lot of time in the last month or so really understanding the city's process for land use. And what we are now targeting is really starting that land use process in early April with our land use application, with the expectation that our submission, our actual submission for land use review, will come toward the end of May. And that will give us time to work through the pre-application process, several neighborhood meetings that we'll need to have during that time period, and really also getting design aligned with where we want to be relative to our land use submission, so that we're giving the city a very complete package of information to review for that land use. So the land use submission will happen, as I said, let's see, I believe it's toward the end of April is when we're expecting to make that land use submission. Trying to read and make sure I'm saying that quote. I'm sorry, the end of May, with the expectation that our land use approval process will be completed in September. And that helps us sort of align with, as we're moving through our design, getting started on the construction documentation. Relative to the city's schedule, we're continuing to work through our term sheet and towards the DDA. Nothing about that has changed other than instead of coming to you in early April to provide a more complete design, we'll be coming on the 20th. That's the only thing that's changed there. And then working toward that June 30th finalization of our disposition and development agreement. And then if you look toward the bottom of your screen, you can see that we've started to get some more detail in here about how we're expecting the construction process to occur. And I will just say that we're working closely with our contractor, which is R&H Construction, to determine exactly the sequencing of these projects and what the optimum way of kind of delivering these projects and working together on them will ultimately be. And you can see right now that what we're thinking is that construction on the hotel will start in roughly April of 2022, with the multifamily construction starting shortly thereafter. The entire construction period is about a little more than 80 weeks. And we are trying to sequence the hotel to start first. And the reason for that is that we would love to get that hotel open in the summertime. That would be wonderful for the city and for us and for our operator. So we're really trying to prioritize that and hoping that we can continue to work toward that construction start date. So I think that's our last slide, Chris, if I remember. Oh, just a few quick next steps, which I kind of talked about already, but you can see them here on your screen in terms of what we have coming up over the next month and a half, which is quite a bit of work. Ultimately pushing toward that end of May land use submission, but really advancing design, continuing to come and talk to you as the design progresses, and working through the initial land use while continuing to meet with our neighborhood association partners, and just pressing forward with the hotel partner. So we've got a lot on our plates. We're really excited. We're having a lot of fun at this stage in the design process, and excited to answer any questions that you have for either me or Scott or Chris this afternoon.
Okay, hey, thank you all very much for the presentation. Just quick on it. So on the time, so I was under the impression that today we would have, the full design of the hotel and everything, and then we were going to provide feedback and you'd be coming back to us on the April 6th meeting for an endorsement of the project. But so what I'm hearing is, well, we're moving everything back.
That's correct. Yeah, I think as Hacker really got into the design, and we engaged with Mosaic, we really need a little bit more time to feel like we've got a cohesive plan to put forth to the city. And this is a big program with a lot of complicated moving parts. We're talking about how do we, put together a ground floor program that works for the hotel partner. We're trying to figure out how we meet all of the various zoning requirements around parking and zoning and all of those things. So we took a hard look at the schedule and decided that we could push that all back a little bit without really changing ultimately the other deadlines that we have. So although we have pushed back our land use submission a little bit, it hasn't really impacted our overall schedule to get this project under construction, which ultimately is the thing I'm most focused on, is when can I start construction? Mm-hmm. So it does put a little bit of a delay on when you're seeing design, but because that land use has moved back just a little bit, you'll still have several more opportunities to see our progressing design and comment on it and provide us with feedback before we give you that final package for endorsement. So April 20th will be a pretty complete design look, but we have penciled in a potential additional meeting on May 6th, you'll see on this slide, to come back to you if we've had comments or things that we want to further refine based on the April 20th meeting.
Okay. Maybe that's, May 4th is our meeting. But
oh, sorry about that. Must have just gotten the dates. Maybe it's May 4th was the meeting and May 6th is the targeted date for our neighborhood meeting.
Okay. I have one question on the parking at the hotel. If you're someone who's not staying at the hotel, you're coming for the retail component, can you talk to us about the street parking around the site? What kind of street parking is being put along B and then first and second adjacent to the building, and kind of walk us through where would someone parking on the street, or would guests kind of be required to go to this this valeted mechanized system?
Sure, I think they'll have the option. So they would certainly have the option to utilize the valet. There will be additional spots above the requirement just for the hotel within the valet. And the valet would be treated just like a typical valet, where you would come up to the front entrance of the hotel and a valet would take your car away, right? You would never know that it was being put into a mechanized system or a parking lot. And then in addition, there are 8 spaces, I believe, on the hotel frontage. And Scott, maybe does it show it on our plan where those 8 spaces are? If you go back to that. Yeah, you can kind of get an idea here. They're not totally shown, but I believe there's either 3 or 4 spaces along the frontage on B Avenue that are parallel parking. And then there's an additional 4 or 5 spaces on First Street that are that head-in parking that's typical along that street.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Okay. So we have angled parking along First.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep, on both sides of the street.
And then no parking for the hotel use at the multifamily sites, or is it generally open to?
Right. Well, right now, zoning code requires us to look at the parcels and meet the parking on site for each independent use. So that's what we've done for these two, is kind of separated them. You know, there is certainly the possibility, and as we get a little bit further down the road, that we'll have some spaces in the multifamily building that would be open to the public or for retail use. I think we have to just continue to evaluate that as we refine the program and really understand how that parking is going to function. And then the other thing just to recall is there is a public parking lot just across the street from the hotel currently. That is a city parking facility.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Burdick.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I really appreciate kind of being able to create covered, usable spaces that help invite the pedestrians in. So, Chris, thank you for coming up with that. I think that was great. And I also think your recommendations for the variance, I definitely support those recommendations. I think it helps the building on all sides. It just feels a lot better. So again, great work with that. So thank you. And at least from my perspective, you have my full support on that. I think it creates a better design that is more inviting to the pedestrian and anyone who's on the street. And the initial hotel, I'm excited to see the work on that, Scott. And I just guess I would ask you to consider to be careful how many gables. I know we want to complement the multifamily. I think that's really important, but we're already pretty heavy. So if we can just keep that in mind, I'd really appreciate it. And but I like how they're complementing each other on the streets in terms of that corner. They have similar corners, and I think that's a really nice feature to add. And again, just thinking of the user experience, I know Chris has done a lot with that, is how are the units going to work from a tenant perspective in addition to the pedestrian outside. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness there, and I'm sure we'll see the same with the hotel. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with.
Hey, Rachel, I have a question for you from your architectural design perspective, because I know zero about it. What are you talking about with the gable, too many gables? What is that? What are the pluses and minuses of having too many gables? I don't know.
To be honest, Counselor, it's personal preference. So okay. A lot of this sometimes comes into just preference, but the gables are the big peaks.
Oh, these things, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
When you come up like this, there's your gable. And there's a series, I believe, of 4 of them going down B Street again, and on First, and then we also have some on State. And I think the ones on First, actually, because there's kind of a break in the building and everything, work actually pretty well. The B Street ones, to me, are a little bit more, they don't sit with me as well. Again, there's also a sense of just personal preference in there, but I think you want to say what's interesting, how does it feel, how does it make the pedestrian feel from the street?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah,
and so it's kind of almost a user experience from the outside.
Understood. I understand that. Cool. I appreciate you explaining that, Counselor.
Sure.
Counselor Winlet.
Well, I liked the first design really well, and I like the improvements even better. So thank you. I really love the open spaces, and it the invitation coming in is wonderful. My question is, if the hotel, that's kind of free reign, that would be separate from the multifamily, right? So you've got pretty much design that you can do whatever you want. Is that correct? So you're not trying to match the buildings at all. From the hotel perspective, the gables aren't really going to be an issue, right? I mean, you can do them with non-gables. I tend to, I liked kind of how you have the hotel different than the multifamily, just to kind of break things up a little bit, so it's not such a mass along the avenue. So, because if you continue to go up the street, there's more buildings that are similar to that, and to have uniqueness, I really applaud you for you know, I know, Scott, you're still going through in your mind probably a million different ideas, but from my perspective, I like some differentiation and some change to make
Sure.
it interesting going up B
Yes.
Street. So
Yeah,
anyway.
understood. Thanks for the input. And we do intend for the hotel to be contrasting the multifamily, contrasting yet complementary. So the building forms that we're looking at are not the same as the multifamily building. So you will see some difference across the street, but especially that pedestrian experience that was mentioned before. We really want the corner experience, pedestrian experience to complement. That's why we thought it was really important to show that to you today.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great to bring the commonality together, because we call this the North Anchor Project for a reason. So I think you're anchoring it very well. So excited, very excited. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Winland. Mr. Boone? Oh, you're muted, Mr. Boone.
Excuse me. Just as a comment that any counselor comments regarding the design, of course, don't address the regulatory requirements, and they're not opining on that. So if the matter comes to the DRC and then ultimately back up to the council on variance questions or compliance with standards, these comments are not prejudging that determination.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Councilor Booth?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank this team. It's I think Lake Oswego would be beautiful when this thing is. I just have a question, and it's maybe Rachel can help in the design, because I am a teacher. I see images. In the images, there is no inclusivity. Like, I don't see any children, maybe one with a mom, and there is no wheelchair, no differently able people, no BIPOC, of course, you know. So is it how the industry work, or, you know, because I think it would be good for an audience that work for diversity, that we have images that it's important to me as a teacher. It's the teacher who's talking right now. So other than that, I'm really looking forward to this being presented to us. Thank you.
And can I comment on that? Thank you for bringing that. That's something that we've already internally talked about as well, is just for the renderings, as we get more renderings out in front of the public, especially towards design review, is making sure that we continue to go find entourage that is a little more reflective of the diversity that'll use the building as well.
Thank you very much for that comment. I appreciate that very much. It's something that at UDP we're focused on, making sure that we're reflective of the communities in which we work. I appreciate that.
It was a question. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask it earlier, but in one of those the outdoor area, the multifamily building, I guess it's on the one on the west, on the southwest corner. Yeah, so I was just curious how that, I know you referred to the accessible side, but they all seem to be stepped. And maybe there's another entrance someone could arrive at this outdoor area from. But anyway, that was my question, how someone would access.
Yeah, no, that's and some of this is just the renderings being a little in process as well. We'll absolutely need to have an accessible entry to that retail tenant. So we definitely want it to be this main corner versus, you know, having it down the road. So the intent is, you know, we do have quite a bit of slope right there. So we're working with our civil engineer to see, first of all, how much warping of this sidewalk in this corner can we do to extend it east. But at a minimum, you know, we'd need a 4-foot zone that a wheelchair could get through there. It's going to be much harder to do off of First.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mayor, I would add that that is the same intent with the hotel. We want to get the accessible entry as the main entry as close to the corner as possible.
Right. Okay. Very good. Mr. Sin or anyone else, any final remarks?
I've got nothing to add, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming with this update. We appreciate it, and great job. Beautiful looking buildings, and we're looking forward to having you back with us here again soon.
Thank you very much. Us too. We're very excited to continue working on this project together.
Thank you. We appreciate the partnership.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. We just have one other item on the LORA agenda, and that is approving appointments to our budget committee, just more of as a formality. These are all folks that we've appointed to the city budget committee, who like us are also the members of the LORA budget committee. And so we have resolution 2101 to approve those appointments. Would someone like to make a motion to approve these?
Move to adopt LORA Resolution 21-01.
Second it. Oh,
After you, Councillor.
no, Tanya.
Is there any discussion? Okay. Ms. Lynn, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Verdick,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Mbu,
Yes.
Mans,
We lost Mans.
Councilor Mans. Oh, she is calling me.
Oh, she left. Yeah, I saw her leave.
Oh.
Yeah, she left a long time. Yeah.
Oh. Oh no.
Okay. We'll continue.
Okay.
Councilor Nguyen
Yes.
and Winland.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 6-0.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Linder. All right. That concludes the redevelopment agency meeting. The redevelopment agency meeting is now adjourned. We're going to convene back in a regular council session, but let's take a 5-minute break and come back at 5:25. Thank you, everyone. We're in recess.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to call back to order the meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council. And next on the agenda is a study session on our 2021 City Council goals and work plans. And City Manager Bennett is going to talk to us about those.
Not very much, though. So before you tonight is essentially the first of the quarterly reports you'll get on your city council goals. The first quarter's report is really about how we're going to go about accomplishing them. Today, I'm looking for essentially head nods that we generally captured the right scope and right timing for how we're going to go about accomplishing these goal projects. I'm not actually looking for detailed policy direction at this point. You'll see from the work plans that at every one of these goals, the folks who are actually going to do the work on city staff will come to you for policy direction. And in fact, for me, the most useful part of the whole report is this handy dandy chart. This is my annotated copy where I sort of lay out when there's going to be staff work being done behind the scenes and then the months where you're going to see council action. So that's what I'm looking for today is, are we generally on the right track? There's two things I would like to make sure that we cover tonight. First is, remember my commitment to you is if you set the agenda and you prioritize as a council, you actually make decisions and prioritize, then this work plan gets incorporated into the proposed budget. Many of you have heard me say the proposed budget is a spending plan to accomplish the council's policy plan. So this is the council's policy plan, and so this will be reflected in the proposed budget. So it's up to you at this point, as the budget rolls forward, to make sure you're having conversations at the budget committee meeting to make sure that as you move through the discussion of the proposed budget into the approved budget, that your work plan is still funded. So that's my first thing. Second thing is just to remind you that I'll come back to you quarterly to report on our progress to these goals. We'll be back again in June. And then the last thing I wanted to make sure I said to you is that the one item that I want to make sure you know about is that if we are going to take up the issue of fireworks in 2021, it needs to come pretty soon. And so if you want to proceed with that work plan the way it's drafted, we'll be back to you in a month at a study session, but we'll be doing some community outreach on that goal project before that. Because, for example, we already have applications from some of the or from some nonprofits to sell fireworks in grocery store parking lots, and we've kind of paused our decision making on those applications until after you guys give us direction about what you want to do. So that's my report. Unless you really want me to talk more, which, as you know, I'm always happy to do. But Your Honor, I think I'll turn this over to you, ask questions, and then, yeah, okay, I won't talk anymore. And then I would really like a head nod from the council about the general scope and direction of these work plans.
I really appreciate you. I mean, I have to say, really going through is very well laid out. Each little memo and then the big chart really gives us a clear picture, and we appreciate the updates. I thought it was really well thought through and executed, and appreciate you putting into the format. On the question of the fireworks, you know, my thinking for this year is one more of like an educational approach, really doing a whole kind of public outreach plan around fireworks safety. I mean, given everything that we've been through this past year, and we actually see every year. And I'd also be for kind of increased enforcement of the current laws we have around fireworks, the ones that are currently illegal. But I'm not really, I'm not in support of a ban on the ground fireworks or sparklers or things like that that are sold in the fireworks stands here. I don't think that's going to go over so well. So that's my opinion on it. Councilor Mans?
Thank you. I think Councilor Verdick in a conversation that I had with her, and I echo what you say, Mayor, laid out what seemed to be a reasonable plan, which is education-based this year, enforcement-based as far as folks who are using perhaps illegal fireworks, where I'm not saying that anyone is, but those fireworks that are already banned in our city, And also having a discussion, and I'm just throwing this out there too, what that means from an enforcement standpoint. We have no idea what sort of dollar amount or staff resource amount is tied into enforcement. So I'd like some direction from staff along those lines as we move through this process. I hope, Councilor Verdict, that I paraphrased more or less what we spoke about and would invite you to add something if you felt that it was worthwhile to chime in. Thank you, Mayor.
So sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Councilman. Councilor Whitland.
I'd really rather not discuss the topic today until we have a work session on it. I think we need to hear from our chief. I think we need to hear, I don't think this is the right setting to start talking about policy personally. I think we should, I think we should agree with the schedule, and then let's look at the schedule and then move from there. Because I don't want to spend the next hour talking about fireworks personally today. I think we need to have the mindset and the right people here to talk about it. So anyway, that's just my thought.
You want more study on it?
Well, yeah, I think it's set in the schedule that we're having a study session on it. I think that our fire chief needs to talk about it. I mean, I think we need to hear the facts before we start making discussions and assumptions. So
but there's exigency though. Ms. Bennett's asking for direction.
Well, actually, what I wanted to make sure you know is that we're going to start community outreach, because what we don't want to do is have you make some kind of tentative decision in April and then have to try to implement it quickly without folks knowing what's going on. I think as a member of the community, I would want to know that this conversation was happening. So I wasn't trying to tell you what to do. I was just trying to let you know that in advance of that study session, we'll be doing outreach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You say me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having the worst internet issues, so bear with me. I'm pretty much, I agree with John on this. I think I have my own opinion already, which honestly is aligned with Joe, which is I think we need to do a really good job of enforcement, maybe even jacked up the ticket prices for people breaking the rules. However, I also wouldn't mind hearing what the community outreach has to say. And, you know, I'm open-minded enough to hear if people really want to say, hey, get rid of them all, then I'd like to hear what they have to say. So I see both of your points, but I would like to get some more info from the community from what Martha's doing. So hopefully you heard.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I disagree with what's being said. I'm just saying this is not the right forum to have a discussion on policy. It's more a discussion of if it's on the schedule, I guess is what I'm talking
about. Okay, Councilor Wynn.
Yeah, not to beat this to death, but I guess when we do have that study session about fireworks, I'd also like to kind of look from the angle of just pure noise. I mean, I think the biggest complaints we get is just it sounds like people lighting dynamite or something. It's just so, it's for a lot of people scary because you don't know if it's somebody shooting a gun or something, but it's more of that, because I think early on, I think being in July, there is that fire safety aspect to it. But because I don't know, not to say that we don't have fires early in the season, but I'd like to more focus on in terms of, just being a good neighbor. I mean, don't traumatize your people that have PTSD and don't traumatize people's pets for an entire week. It's just, it's already tough as it is already.
Right. Thanks, Councilor.
Yeah, I almost, what my problem is what Martha is saying, because people are applying to sell, like at Safeway or at the side, we have to tell them. I really agree. I think John and we had the same view. I talked to the chief. But like Aaron and Joe say, I mean, it's a tough sell. We cannot tell Lake Oswego folks you cannot do firework. And sometimes it's better not to say certain things that you cannot enforce. We don't have the police force to do that. if we tell them, and I bet you that if we say it's prohibited, we will have neighbors against neighbors. My neighbor calling because the kids of the neighbor are having fireworks. It's let's just maybe think of this and let it with neighborhood leaders and just tell them what the chief wants to say, because there are 2 fires a year because of that. So it's a dangerous thing. But we need to, we are also the steward of this city in terms of, and popularity means you ask people you lead to do things they can do. And you know, with the pandemics that's ending, maybe 4th of July is the first event they will have to have a party. You tell them, you told them you cannot go to school. Second, you cannot even go to the market now. You cannot have firework. I mean, I won't vote for that, honestly, between that. And we should do it faster because, like Martha say, we have to make sure. No, I'm repeating because I didn't even think of that. But yes, people want to sell their fireworks. People have to get the permit to do so. We have to do something. Thank you. Sorry, you know, if I.
Thank you, Councilor Boots. So, Ms. Bennett, what information? The only reason we're talking about this, I know you needed some information.
I just didn't want people to be surprised when we started doing outreach on this fireworks issue, and it needs to be accelerated if we're going to do it this year because of the permits that are waiting for council direction.
Is there maybe what I'm kind of hearing is a reluctance to?
The chief is going to bring you options. You're not going to get like, we leave it alone or we don't. And I will also say, I do think that the majority of complaints the city gets are about fireworks that are illegal in the state of Oregon. And so I do think that Councilor Wendland's correct that you need an opportunity to talk to Chief Johnson and the fire department staff about it. I just didn't want anybody to be surprised when they started to see us doing outreach about this.
Well, yeah, I'm not hearing real resounding kind of a push towards a ban. We don't need to get the community worked up unnecessarily, but it sounds like what we do want are some options that, you know, are beneath the ban, but will move us in a safer direction.
If you guys are not considering a ban and you know that tonight, then we will process the permits. I guess I had understood this to maybe include a discussion about a potential ban. So.
Well, I mean, hey, we don't have the chief here. So, I mean, we haven't had a presentation on this. We haven't had a work study. I mean, that's bad policy.
I'm agreeing with you, Counselor. I'm agreeing with you.
So, right. So I think let it get on the schedule. You've scheduled it. I think we're good. We're good.
All right. Well,
is everyone
we'll just hold the permits. We'll just hold the permits for now. It's okay. It's okay.
We're going to hold permits and we're going to let the community know that we're considering a ban. Is everyone okay with that?
That we're considering options. We're going to say we're considering options, including a potential ban. Is that right?
I disagree.
I mean, I'm not for the ban at all.
No, yeah, because you know, with all due respect, you know, if we ban that, we become unpopular council. You know, at this time, right?
We're the no fun council.
Huh?
The no fun council.
Yep, no fun. That we destroy parties, you know, on coronavirus.
Oh
time.
man,
Councilor Verdict.
Can we get control of this?
I don't know if I'm personally saying I don't want to ban. I think this year it would be too quick. I think we need to move right now on education, and we need to hear from our fire chief and other experts before we actually say there is a ban. So I don't want to say that in the future I wouldn't like to see a ban, or maybe a year from now. But right now, I think we need to have further discussions with our community, and I think we need a strong education because there is a danger on many levels. I agree with Councilor Wen that it's more than just a fire danger, and we need to address those issues as well. We also need to teach, even with the legal fireworks, how do you dispose of them properly? I mean, there's a lot to this that needs to go on, so I think we definitely should move forward quickly to City Manager Bennett's recommendation with the education, but I'm not sure any of us necessarily, and I hope I'm making an assumption here, would necessarily promote a ban for 2021. So maybe this is the year we do the study sessions to understand if in the future we implement a ban. As a potential, again, within all those options that City Manager Bennett recommended that we listen to.
I agree with that, Councilor Burdick. Councilor Wynn, did you have a? Yeah, okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Well, the state hasn't even issued any fire department or fireworks permits. Is that correct? I mean, like the Lake Corp isn't, they're waiting for the city to issue. I mean, I think the whole city is or the state is in a stall pattern. Is that correct on getting any permits for
those are commercial
fireworks
shows. I'm talking about the sale of the individual, the legal fireworks. The people,
like the Safeways or the
the
Albertsons type
nonprofits
people?
sell at the grocery stores. I'm not talking about the commercial permits. I have been assuming that you guys are not. Okay, I was once associated with the city where we did ban the use of individual fireworks, but we did not ban commercial shows. So I assume that we will, still be permitting under all circumstances commercial shows by licensed operators. Yeah.
Right.
Because that would be a whole new order of no fun.
Councilor Rapp.
Yeah, I was just gonna, if you guys, I had to switch to my phone, sorry about that. But if you can hear me, I was just gonna say, if we have to delay on issuing the permits for selling fireworks, and that delays them setting up shop and then selling, it's not gonna stop people from still getting fireworks. They can just go to Tiger, Westland, Wilsonville, wherever, and get fireworks. So to me, I agree with having some sort of study session and just kind of.
That's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. We'll just do that. It's okay if we don't issue the permits till the end of April. Those stands don't get set up until 2 to 3 weeks before July 4th anyway. It's okay. So we'll just proceed with the work plan is what I'm hearing you say. And we'll make sure that you get the full spectrum of options. Okay?
Okay.
Sounds good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to open this particular kettle of fish.
Yeah.
I just didn't want anybody to be surprised.
Okay. Councilor Windland.
On a positive note, I think we've got the game plan in place, and I want to commend Martha and her whole staff for putting this together because it's a lot of work. And this is why she told us we could only have 15 or 20 things on the list, because you would have had a 400-page process. So I'm very happy with what's on here, and I think we should move forward. And if we get it all done, we're going to have a big celebration.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Windland. Okay, so is there anything else, Ms. Bennett, that you need from us on?
No, if you all feel good about this work plan, great.
Okay.
Off we go.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much again for that. Moving on to council business. First item up for consideration is Ordinance 2868, which ends LOC Article 12.51 to establish a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board. And Ms. Phelan is here to present to us on that.
Thank you, Mayor Buck, and good evening, City Council. My name is Megan Phelan, Assistant City Manager. And as Mayor Buck mentioned, I'm here in front of you with an ordinance that would establish a permanent Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Board. As Council may recall, this is a recommendation that's coming from our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Task Force, which finalized their recommendation report last year, and Council had a study session on earlier this year. The ordinance itself is pretty straightforward. We're proposing a 9-member board, and the duties that they would be assigned to were established by or recommended by the DI task force, but it would be to include increasing engagement in diverse communities, and also collaborate with the community council and staff to implement the DI task force other recommendations and create long-term diversity, equity, inclusion goals, to advise the public information office and communications team on methods of inclusive outreach and communicating to diverse groups, to promote the city's efforts in diverse populations, engaging diverse populations within the boards and commissions, neighborhood associations, and other civic volunteer structures, and participating as voting members of interview panels for boards and commissions. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about the ordinance as proposed.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Nguyen.
Thank you, Ms. Phelan, for putting this report together. I had questions about, I know that there's a 9-member, there's going to be a 9 members of this advisory board. Can you talk a little bit more about, is it possible, I mean, is it legal for us to be able to ask that the members of this advisory board be, I guess, how to say it, members of disadvantaged or minority groups? Because I think that in the whole purpose of the DEI advisory board is to provide council some insight and be able to kind of provide just some lived experience. I think that's what we're looking for. It's just when we are making policy, we're making decisions, we can't fully expect to be able to have the perspective of those that have lived experiences that are different from us. And so is there any way that we are able to ask that, that we have more of a diverse, make the diversity a part of the criteria in a legal way? Because what I know that certainly there are people that are experts in DEI. It's a subject matter. It's an academic field. I just want to be able to know that we also have people that can speak to that from a lived experience, not just from the academic side, not just from the professional side, but is there a way we can ask that, much in the same way when we put together the task force back a couple of years ago, we asked that when we put together the task force, when I was on that panel to kind of, along with Councilor Mans, as well as former Mayor Studebaker, we were asked to try to consider the makeup of the task force. So I think we were able to do that, and we're able to make an effort to try to identify different perspective and different voices from the different minority groups that are traditionally underrepresented in boards and commissions. So sorry for the long-winded question, but that might be a question for Mr. Boone. So I think your hand's raised, so maybe you can answer that.
Mr. Boone.
Be happy to. I think the council can certainly broaden the search and identify the goal and the mission of the advisory board, and look for candidates that are supportive and have something to bring to the table to achieve the mission and goals of the advisory board. I think but however, I would not advise sort of excluding persons from the qualifications at this point in the code criteria of saying, well, these criteria will not be considered. I mean, I think it's, as in all boards and commissions, I think it's up to the council to pick persons who will fulfill the missions of the board as the council so deems it. So I would leave that to the boards and to the city council members then in their selection process. So I think expansion is good, exclusion is not.
Well, I think that I don't want to exclude anybody, but what I'm thinking is that much in the same way that we have for like Planning Commission or DRC, we ask for people to come to this group, come to Planning Commission, for example, with, I think that the makeup, if I remember correctly, that, maybe it's not planning, but maybe it's a different board, but, there is a landscape architect on there. There's an attorney on there. There's an engineer on there. So we look at certainly what kind of skills and what kind of experience those members bring to the Planning Commission, for example. In this case here, because the subject matter is specific to DEI, find a way that we can actually bring people that have that lived experience. I think for me, the biggest thing is that lived experience, not from, having initials behind your name, that you are a certified diversity officer because you have a certificate on your wall somewhere, but it's that lived experience is what I'd like to be able to see, because that's going to be the most important asset that that this advisory board can bring to the table, because we can hire consultants all day long. We can have all these PhDs in DI, but I want to see people, I want to hear people that live in this community that have that lived experience that can help us make better decisions.
Right. And I think that they're saying that that's, Mr. Boone is saying that's fine if the council agrees to that.
So currently in the ordinance, I have a sentence that says appointments will endeavor to include representatives of diverse backgrounds. So that's currently being proposed in front of you right now.
And you can talk with on the recruitment process. How do you find those persons? That's what you want to direct staff to do. That's fine.
One thing I kind of wanted along those same lines, given that this is a DI advisory board, we do want people of diverse backgrounds. I wanted to propose the idea of slating 2 slots on this board for youth members, just like we have on the Parks Advisory Board, and well, really all of our advisory boards, we have a designated youth members. Especially given that our student population is much more diverse than our adult population in the city, so that would tend to bring us more. We do see that our youth who are involved in the city as a whole are more diverse than the adult members of our community who are involved in the city, and also to open up membership to people that work full-time in Lake Oswego or are business owners in Lake Oswego, but who may not live within the urban services boundary. As we already have it where per this ordinance, where a majority have to be residents of the city, which is good and consistent with our other boards and commissions, but a non-majority can live outside of the city as long as they're within the urban services boundary. And I think included in that group should be full-time employees or business owners who may live outside the urban services boundary, if folks agree with that. Again, with the aim of just expanding the overall diversity of the group.
Mayor, if I may clarify, currently there's no age restriction as the ordinance is written, but if I'm hearing you clearly, to make it more accurate, what we could do is change it to say 7 regular members plus 2 members less than 18 years old at the time of appointment, to mirror, I think, similarly to what actually SAB has in their language currently.
Right. Yes. That's what I'm proposing.
Yes.
And do those for the 1-year appointments, because youth have a tendency to move on fairly quickly.
Exactly. I think we've
to college and whatever.
1 year with like option to renew. We're still around. What is it? Would everyone support that kind of framework for the board? We have others.
Is 9 a good number? In other words, would you like to add 2 out of the 9 that we have? Would you want to just add 2 high school representatives or youth representatives? So it would be an 11-person board?
I asked Ms. Phelan that same question, and she was the kind of the number that we go with the other boards, including those that have the 2 youth members. So adults. And I had the same question. Okay, Councilor Mans.
I would say that 11 is a rather large number and can become a little unwieldy, perhaps. But Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to go ahead and move to enact Ordinance 2868, changing the language to include 7 regular members, 2 members under the age of 18, as well as language allowing folks to apply who work full-time in Lake Oswego, but don't live within the urban services district.
So can I know you just made the motion, but I hate legislation on the dais. I'd like it if Megan, instead what you do is direct staff to amend the ordinance and bring it back at the next meeting with those language changes so that we don't mess up in our drafting. That'd be great.
however you want to do it.
I just know I've made more
Sure.
mistakes recommending language changes on the dais than any other single type of mistake in my career. So I don't want to like encourage you guys to do it.
I would just add that if an ordinance is substantially changed, it has to come back to a second meeting anyway, so you're not losing anything.
Perfect. I'm not concerned.
Okay.
Are there any other, is there any other feedback or questions about any other potential changes to the ordinance?
It's great. I read it. It's good.
Sorry, Your Honor, I interrupted the motion.
Well, no,
So
would someone like to make a second to Councilor Mann's, and Councilor Mann, so you are amending your motion to you're directing staff to come back with.
Staff to come back with the additional language as stated in this meeting, which I think
Second
I'm
it.
very aware of.
That's it.
Second from Councilor Boop. Okay, any further discussion? Anyone on the council? Okay, we'll let Ms. Linda, let's call the roll then.
Okay. Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Burdick,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Boop,
Yes.
Mans,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
and Winland.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Ms. Phelan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. Yeah.
And just to remind, we are in April going to open recruitment for all of the boards and commissions, including this.
Correct.
Advisory board. Okay. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 21-05, which is the Memorandum of Understanding with Metro regarding the multifamily affordable housing on Boones Ferry and West Sunset Drive. We have Director Siegel. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Good afternoon, members of the City Council. Scott Siegel, Planning and Building Services Director. This item was carried over from March 2nd. It's in regard to a memorandum of understanding with Metro and the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. And what it would do is it would direct the city or direct staff to begin exploring the possibility of meeting some of the area's housing needs on the Boones Ferry Road staging site as a redevelopment opportunity on that site. I won't go over all the background, which we did present back in February, but I wanted to bring you up to date because some of the council members had some questions, and I appreciate your reaching out. I hope I was able to answer questions from those of you who had them. But what I'd like to do today is just say a few words about what the MOU is, what it is not, and how we would move forward with this. I also have some illustrations on the housing needs that this is specifically intended to address. And so I have a few slides that I'd like to put up on the screen, and I think that'll help us kind of walk through what is before you, and then you can decide whether or not you want to approve the resolution. So I need to go ahead and start this presentation here. Okay. So as I said, the MOU is about exploring options for meeting identified housing needs. Residents, households who are not able to attain or find affordable housing for their needs in our area. And the staging site, the property that we're discussing, is in the Lake Grove area. It's at the corner of West Sunset Drive and Boones Ferry Road. The city's using it currently for construction staging on the Boones Ferry Road Improvement Project. The prior council direction with regard to housing was that we would work with Clackamas County to pursue development that utilizing Metro Housing Bond funds. Subsequent to that, the council directed staff to begin work on possibly constructing one new affordable housing project by rezoning this site that we're talking about. So as I said during the prior study session, we didn't just begin the rezoning process because we wanted to better understand what the housing needs were how our partners at Clackamas County and Metro could perhaps assist in this area, and then explore the topic a little bit further with you, which we've done. And just by way of background, the housing needs that we're talking about are needs of those who currently are working in our community or may be living in the community, but their incomes are not really in line with what is affordable or attainable, and the housing options or units that are available at market rents are not affordable. And these are just some examples of what that looks like. The income targets that the county and Metro are focused on really fall into two different brackets or categories, I would say. One is that with the Metro Housing Bond, the region is targeting about 40% of the 2,000 to 3,000 units that are to be produced with the housing bond for those households earning at or below 30% of the area median income. And so as you can see on this chart, those are folks who are older, they may be on a fixed income, they're living off Social Security, or maybe an individual who's working in the retail sector or minimum wage, essentially, at or below 30% of AMI. The other segment that the regional housing bond and the county are really focused on is family housing. And so units with two or more bedrooms, essentially. And the income range for those households, it may be up to 80% of the area median income. But the lower on that range that they can meet, the greater the need, obviously, so the higher the priority. But hopefully this gives some examples. These are, people who are working in the community. They may be teachers, they may be retail workers, they may be, they may be self-employed. So just a variety of housing needs. And as you can see, the average rents, and these are county averages, and they're from last year. The household that's earning $40,000 a year, the single paramedic, for example, would be able to afford a housing rent at or below probably between $500 and $1,000 a month. So you may be able to find units that are available at that rate in our community, but they're scarce. And so the average rents are typically $1,200, $1,300 a month for a single bedroom. So you can kind of get a sense of what the gap is for the housing needs. And there are a variety of programs that are available, including rental assistance vouchers through the county. And there are waiting lists for that, but there are other ways that the housing needs are met, but housing production is really the greatest need in the region. So I just wanted to kind of recap that. And the needs in our community, so far, no projects have been identified in this part of Clackamas County. There are 4 projects underway that the County Housing Authority is pursuing with regional bond money. So what does the MOU do? The city would agree to explore the housing options on this site with Metro and Clackamas County. That's pretty much what we would be doing, is exploring housing options. We would initiate a rezoning process that would be necessary to deliver any kind of housing, whether it's market rate or income targeted housing on this site. And some of you had questions about what the zoning concept or scheme would look like. And in my thought is that there is already a plan for this portion of Westlake Grove. There is a very specific code and set of design standards that are in place. And so my thought is that we would want to stick with the plan as much as we can and really just add to the uses that are allowed in that zoning, not changing it from what is currently office commercial to something entirely different, but rather instead look at adding housing as a permitted use on the site, and stick with the development kind of form and scale that are envisioned in that Westlake Grove Design District, not change the code in a way that would create incompatibilities with the rest of the district or the neighborhood. So some of you had asked me about what our approach would be on that. And so I just wanted to assure you that that's how we would proceed if you directed us to move forward. The MOU would also allow us to begin exploring the possibility of selling the property to Metro with site acquisition funds that the agency has, with specific terms for the future development on the site. It wouldn't obligate the city to sell the property. In fact, Metro probably wouldn't want to begin discussing that until the zoning or code changes were nearing completion. So it's really just opening up the discussion of the possibility of selling the property for housing. Finally, we would work with Clackamas County Housing Authority in scoping a solicitation for development proposals, including the scoring criteria, and then ultimately selecting a developer with a project that meets or could meet our code and would fit within the parameters that we've agreed on through the process. So that's what the MOU does. It allows us to explore this possibility. It doesn't commit us to selling the property. It's not a rezone or a land use decision. It's not even a development program or a plan. And there would be no financial commitment from the city other than to begin this process of amending the code or changing the zoning at this point. What are some of the potential future costs? The rezoning process does have some costs, as I said. We would need to prepare a traffic study, which is something that we typically do not do in-house. We would contract with a consultant to do that. We would need to repay LORA if the property is sold. And so the funds from that sale, the proceeds would go to make LORA whole on the property. And then any future development of the site with income targeted housing would likely take advantage of the fee waivers that are currently provided by code for affordable housing, as well as potential property tax abatement. So those are some long-term and potentially some ongoing costs that would be associated with producing housing on the site, affordable housing. However, really, even without the MOU, if someone came along and wanted to develop, it could even be primarily a market rate housing development, provided they set aside at least, I think it's 10% of the units to meet an affordable housing need. They could be eligible for the fee waivers as well. So, there's potential costs or opportunity costs with or without the MOU, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware of some of the trade-offs. So the request is that the council approve resolution 2105. And I do have a couple of revisions that I'd like to put before the council, and they're in writing here on the next two slides. So that if you're inclined to approve the resolution, I would recommend that you include the following changes. So one of which is under section 2.2. This is the language that describes the housing authority's commitment and their intent to advocate for enough units that would make the project work for them. And rather than specifying 50 or more units on the site, which I think we would come to that number having gone through this process and scoping the development solicitation. Rather than specifying that as a minimum, what I would suggest is that we would say approximately 50 units and not exceeding 3 stories. And the reason for that is that in looking at the Westlake Grove Design District plan and the code and the neighborhood association plans for that area, as well as just the pattern of development along Boones Ferry Road, anything more than 3 stories would, in my opinion, as the planning director, I think would be out of scale with this part of our community. So I just put that out there. It's certainly subject to your direction. The second change is really about the schedule. And when we began drafting this I think we were more ambitious than what we could actually achieve. So rather than having the schedule as specified in the draft that is before you, I would recommend that we refine that to include the following milestones that would have us beginning with neighborhood outreach in April and have the rezoning or the code amendment process run through the spring and summer so that this would come back before you for the land use decision in late summer or early fall. And that concludes my presentation, the recommendations. I'm happy to bring these back up onto the screen if you would like to look at them further, but I will take it down for now unless anyone has any questions about the language. Okay. Then I will stop sharing. Thank you. I'm open to any questions, Mayor.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Siegel. Council Rep.
Yeah, so Scott, I mean, it's not really that material to this, but you said in your presentation, or you wrote in the presentation, that a firefighter makes $64,000. From my understanding of seeing the budgets, firefighters make significantly more than that. Is that correct?
That's a Megan question. Megan, are you still out there?
Like, I thought they were in the 150 to 200,000 range.
That's what they cost, not what they make. Oh, hold on a second. Here's Megan.
Oh, there she is.
Hello.
Hey, Megan.
Hi. So if you are looking at very step one of a basic firefighter on our current compensation schedule, the annual salary is just over $65,000 a year. However, it's very common in fire service that they're eligible for certificate pay, additional premium pays, incentive pays. And typically for us, when we're looking at our budget numbers, we're also looking at payroll taxes, benefits, and all the other loaded costs that come along with personnel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it, Megan.
Okay, Councilor Winland.
Thank you, Director Siegel. You always make great presentations. So I think they're very precise. So just to clarify your change and your preciseness, that you went from the 90-page document to a few different things. You're just wanting us to approve the zone change and then entering into a conversation with Metro and Clackamas County. Is that correct?
We're not approving the zone change, right? We're initiating a discussion about zoning.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that's kind of the, okay.
Yeah, this if you were to approve the resolution, you would, in doing that, you'd be directing the staff to initiate the rezoning process, but not making any decisions.
Okay. And so the other part of this is as you go through, what kind of, I guess, control or options do we give up by, if this were to go through, do we have any say on who's going to live there, or is it all with the bond language and Clackamas County dictating how this facility would be used? I mean, do we have any say in that from a local control?
In terms of who would be living there? No.
Well,
the development program?
No, I mean,
no.
Well, I mean, not specifically who. Yeah. I'm saying the income, is it, when you had that chart up there, is it mostly people under 30%, or is it a lot of people at the 60%, or was there some at the 80%? You had three bubbles on there, and there are three different demographics.
Yeah, that would be part of the conversation that we, the city and Metro and Clackamas County, would have prior to, issuing a solicitation for development proposals. So that RFP would specify, developer, you need to be able to meet household needs in these income ranges or in these categories. And so that would be part of the discussion that we would have. We know that the regional bond and Clackamas County's implementation plan say that they're, not only are they trying to meet, the needs at the lowest end of that range, but they also are trying to meet the needs of families in larger units. So two ends, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Winland. Councilor Mbu?
Yes, I thank you, Scott, again. I think things are clear to me. And I thank you also to take the time to meet us the other day. I just want to move to adopt Resolution 2105, if the council agree. And with all the precision and all the rectification, and I don't know how Scott called them. So
Yeah, I'm glad to put that back up. It was one change had to do with the schedule, just bringing it up to date with where we're at today. The second was to specify that in our rezoning effort, we would be looking at keeping the building height and or number of stories in line with what we currently have allowed. Yeah.
yes, thank you. So with those precision, I move to adopt Resolution 2105.
Okay, is there a second? Councilor Mance.
Second.
Okay. All right. And any further discussion? Councilor Winland.
So I guess though there I'm on again. I'm in support of moving forward to explore the possibilities with Metro and Clackamas County. There's a lot of off ramps that we have still, but I really want to make sure that we have initially not just the zoning change you had on your schedule of reaching out to the neighborhood, but I think so far we're kind of ahead of the curve. I think we really need to make sure that we touch base with our neighbors, with the Lake Grove business community on not just the zoning change, but the intent of what we may be going down, just to see what their feedback is. Because I think community engagement with our neighborhoods and our business partners is very important. I'd love to hear what their input is on this. I think there's one option that we're considering for this development, and I guess from your perspective, I'd like to know, I know Metro is just giving us the money or potentially giving us the money as a funding source, but is there, do you think there's other partnerships that we could be involved with to get a project that would be under more local control versus, I kind of feel like Metro and Clackamas County are going to be putting all the rules on this project and we're going to have very little input. I don't know about that, but I guess our discussion will continue in that. So I don't know what my input is that we go about this slowly and we have conversations. I don't want to lose control from a Lake Oswego standpoint because I think we need to really serve our community, and we have a lot of people that are in housing needs as it is, and I want to make sure that we have a product or a facility that's going to help Lake Oswego's sort of affordable housing shortage. And that's my primary concern with this project and why I was very supportive of it in the beginning. I just don't want so many Metro and county handcuffs on us that we can't make this serve Lake Oswego to the best possible way of serving our citizens. So
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Winland. I see it as a continuation of the dialogue that we opened up a few years ago when the city hosted a forum on rent burden. And we heard from local residents, we heard from Lake Oswego residents and property managers and actually housing providers or producers who have board members who live in Lake Oswego, and they all came to us to tell us how we what we should be doing in this way. So I think we could reach back out to that group of community members and make sure that they're at the table, or at least they're consulted as we continue our discussion with Metro and Clackamas County, so that it's grounded in Lake Oswego, is what I think what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. That's essentially, I want to make sure that this is, we don't have to own it. I mean, I'm not saying that we own it, but I think I want to be very cognizant of the fact that we do have a lot of people that are in a situation in Lake Oswego that need help with housing affordability. And I just want to make sure we really help out our community. So that's my main thing.
I think we all agree with that. Thank you, Councilor Winland. Yeah, any further discussion? All right, Ms. Linder, please call the roll.
Okay, Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilors Burdick,
Yes.
Raff,
No.
Mboop,
Yes.
Mans,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Wenlin.
Yep.
Okay, motion passes 6-1.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Thank you, everyone. Okay. And we have information from council. Does anyone have anything to report? Okay.
None for me. I missed the DRC meeting last night by mistake. So I did start an hour early. So daylight savings, I guess.
It was just adoption of findings.
I did before this meeting. I walked over to the new building, and it is fabulous. I have to say, it's looking very, very good. I'm just very excited for all of you to, and for all of us to be together in that building soon. It's going to be soon. Ms. Bennett, Mr. Boone, any?
I was just going to say the City Hall move is going well, but be patient with us because many of us have computers in one spot and stuff other places. So just in a month, we'll be back to kind of.
When's our first meeting there again?
May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day.
Be with you.
May the 4th be with
Star
you.
Wars Day.
Be with
How are we all even at work on a?
On a holiday. It's also my sister's birthday, which we always thought was appropriate. So.
And I'm just looking forward to tomorrow.
Well, you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot tomorrow.
Yes, we have a special meeting tomorrow, and so we'll end our meeting and see everyone then. Thank you all for tonight. This meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.